This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Left, a weekly, proudly progressive show with me and Shano. And we are here to remind you that liberal is not a bad word. Good morning, Shano.
Good morning. I think it's a mighty fine word.
I think so, too. Where we keep moving forward, progress.
I agree.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah. And our saying used to be, so you can think before you vote. It's very interesting that right now we kind of set that aside.
Yes.
Because we like to get some things done before the next election. But if you look at the conservatives and the Republicans, boy, they're full bore already back into it, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they are.
We got to start suppressing early this time because all those court orders got in our darn way. But go on with the news. I'm sorry.
Yes. We're going to get into the news as we do every week. A few stories that we like to share that you may have missed or perhaps need a little bit more attention. A fun one this morning. Did you know, Shano, that the war on Christmas has already begun?
No.
Yes, it is just the beginning of December, but it is official. The war on Christmas has begun. I love this article. NBC News reports that the beer can Festivus pole has officially been placed next to the nativity scene in Florida. Festivus for the rest of us. Yes. Deerfield Beach activist and blogger Shaz Stevens essentially wanted to express his non-religious beliefs. So, with the permission of the city, Stevens has assembled his metallic Festivus pole consisting of 23 beer cans about 6 feet away from baby Jesus. That is awesome.
So it's gold, frankincense, myrrh, and natty ice.
That's it. That's exactly.
There it is.
I didn't know the wise man brought, Pabst Blue Ribbon, but
in Florida they did.
Apparently they did. Yes, and it's been constructed on a rather large intersection of Hillsborough Boulevard and Federal Highway. Anybody who lives in Florida is familiar with that intersection, and it is proudly being displayed there so you can all go and celebrate the war on Christmas with Mr. Stevens. Good job to him. Festivus for the rest of us. And happy Christmahana Kwanzaa while we're at it. In activism news, and as well as crappy CEO news, activists in the UK have been targeting Starbucks for their failure to pay corporate income taxes. The U.S. Uncut movement did begin here, but didn't get so much attention. But UK Uncut has gathered a lot of support, and they are now protesting Starbucks, more than 50 stores, to complain about the coffee chain's corporate beneficial tax arrangements. Good on them, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Activism still is alive and well in this country as well as the UK, even though sometimes we think it doesn't have an effect. The Starbucks protesters transformed stores into refuges and homeless shelters, refuges and homeless shelters to highlight the tax issue as well as the government cuts that have occurred there. So it's really interesting to see that people are still getting active in our country as well as all around the world, and they are not going to put up with corporate greed any longer. Everything okay over there, Shano?
Yeah, I just like to check the stations, make sure they're going.
Yes, everything.
Because we are kind of, throwing it through a little laptop that's going all over. It's amazing that it works sometimes.
It is. It absolutely is. Back here in the U.S., there are more CEOs officially increasing prices as a result of Obamacare. The latest in the chain is now the CEO of Cheesecake Factory, that warns Obamacare will be, quote unquote, very costly.
I've got an idea. I've got a great idea. It'll help everyone, and it'll bring down healthcare costs. Instead of increasing the prices, why don't we reduce the portion size just a little bit?
Yeah,
about that?
Exactly.
So that the human being could actually consume what they serve you in an entree.
Yeah, that might benefit obesity rates as well.
Food costs goes down. There's that little extra to give towards healthcare. What do you think?
Well, but the interesting part is that the Cheesecake Factory already provides health insurance for their employees.
So they're not affected at all.
So they're not affected at all. Essentially, he's
She's just making a political statement.
Yes, he's coming out stating that it'll be very expensive and it will be passed on to the customer. Nice guy. That worked out so well for Papa John's, Denny's. What other CEOs wanted to come and speak out about how expensive Obamacare was going to be, and people got pissed off.
Yeah, and then they end up recanting most.
Yeah, so I'm waiting for this guy to come back out and say, okay, we can find other ways to cover the cost, especially considering they already provide health care. They're not affected.
Very odd.
Yes, so he's essentially just coming out to make a political statement. Nice guy.
Which just fine. Go ahead, make a political statement, but don't scare the crap out of workers.
No, it's just fine to make a political statement, but I can, in turn, make a political statement by not patronizing your business. And as an employee, you can make a political statement by working somewhere else.
That's the kicker, though. With a relatively high unemployment rate of 7.7, which actually is better than it has been.
Yes.
It definitely is an employer's market out there. So when you say just go get another job, it ain't that easy.
Fair enough.
You're allowed to, it gives employers the room to be that way. To say, no, you can't have this. No, you can't have that. Oh, you're going to quit? Fine. I got 100 other people that'll take your job. And that's, one of they love that. I have to tell you, corporations, you look at the stock market right now, through the roof. They love 7.7.
Love high unemployment.
Yeah.
And with that said, of course, the good news this week was the job numbers.
Although I turned on one of the
right-wing shows.
Yes, and the lead story was 350,000 people dropped out of the job market last week or last month.
Did they state where they got those numbers?
No.
Did they happen to mention the 7.7 7.7% unemployment rate?
It was not only the headline; it was the only line about unemployment.
Interesting.
I would like to know what part of those were actually people who were retiring. 65, whatever the age of 67.
I will give it to any journalist, any reporter, even those that you have to put in air quotes, that the unemployment rate is much higher than the 7.7% because of people who are no longer looking for work. But how about celebrating some good news for the country?
Because that would be giving Democrats and their policies credit.
See, I expected the talking point on that to be that job numbers always get better during December because people are hiring temporary work for the holidays.
Well, actually, they were expecting the forecast was quite a bit lower because of Sandy,
right?
Hurricane Sandy, but they kind of offset and they beat expectations,
as they've done for several months in a row now.
I believe so.
Interesting. Yes. So anyhow, we will not be patronizing the Cheesecake Factory for quite some time.
But we don't call for boycotts here.
No.
It's up to you. You have
absolutely.
Make your own personal decision.
Boycotts hurt a lot more than just the CEO and the owners of the company. They often hurt employees and cost jobs. So, no, we don't call for boycotts, but we can call for helpful suggestions like, hey, David Overton, maybe come out and stop scaring your employees and your customers. So, in some good news, and hopefully it turns out to be good, defying Rick Scott, Florida legislators have introduced a bill to restore early voting days.
Really?
Yes.
Now, introduced by whom?
State Senators Arenthia Joyner and Gwen Margolis.
Are they Democrats?
They are. Big shocker there.
Mm-hmm. And aren't both houses in Florida Republican?
Yes.
Okay.
But
sorry.
Thank you for putting a wet blanket on my good voting days news.
I didn't want to get preemptively exuberant over this.
Well,
hopefully, but bringing it up, then you can put political pressure because people say, yeah, I like that idea. Those Democrats are right. And that's the worst thing for a Republican here. Democrats are right. Oh.
Yeah, how about people don't like standing in 6, 7, 8, 9-hour long lines to vote? It is absolutely unacceptable. Yes, these two state senators, Joyner and Margolis, have pre-filed bills SB 80 and SB 82, which would reinstitute the 14 days of early voting, as well as increase the actual hours of early voting per day from 6 hours to a mandatory 12 hours. Another change suggested by them is that local election supervisors should expand the number of early voting locations. Currently, supervisors can only hold early voting at their offices, libraries, and city halls, but these two fine state senators suggest using facilities such as courthouses, colleges, churches, and community centers to make sure everybody gets a chance to vote.
Sounds like a real tragedy for Republicans.
It does. We know what Paul Weyrich said.
As the voting populace goes down, our leverage goes up, or whatever it is. I should know it by now. But you know what I'm saying.
Yes. In unsurprising news...
Is that a new segment now?
This is a new segment, yes. Thank you for stating the obvious news. A new poll up on Mediaite. Congress ranks second lowest approval rating and honesty rating, beating only car salespeople.
Actually, that is surprising because I would probably trust a car salesperson more.
I have to agree with you.
I object.
It's a close margin. According to this new poll, Americans rank members of Congress quite poorly when it comes to honesty and ethics. They came in second to last, beating only car salespeople.
You know what, though? The problem is, though, then you ask them about their specific congressperson. You know what I'm saying? When you take those polls, it's Congress as a whole, and they extrapolate out all the negative feelings they have about Congress to those other Congress people. So then you end up with, in elections, incumbency still ruling. You know, add to it money, but...
Well, I think that's also, to some degree, a result of people not understanding local politics, which is where, it starts from the ground up. Those local politicians are the ones that have the highest impact on people's lives. And so because they don't know, sure, they're like, well, I haven't heard anything bad, so they must be fairly trustworthy.
Okay.
I think people need to get more informed with local politics.
Agreed.
Yes. In this study, for some reason it is cut off who conducted the study, but from memory, I believe it was Pew Research. 54% of people polled said Congress had a very low or low rating. The only category ranked lower was car salespeople, with only 49% of people saying they had a very low or low honesty and ethical rating. Yes. So good job, Congress. Though that's been a very successful year. All of the blocking of any actual work being done seems to be working out really.
Maybe their goal for the next term. Last Congress it was to make Obama a one-term president. This term it's to see if they can beat those car salesmen in terms of that poll.
Well, they are beating them just slightly, depending on which way you want to look at it. We know Republicans love the race to the bottom. We've always thought that meant wages, but perhaps they're going for approval ratings as well.
They've started out in the lame duck session with a bang.
Yeah, we're going to get into that later. It always goes over well with the people when you filibuster your own bills. Yes, we will certainly be talking about that. But one additional story I wanted to cover before we have to run to break, and again, I don't think, sadly, this will surprise anybody. The NRA is pushing for elimination of gun spree solving gun registry. Where is it happening? Michigan.
I don't understand.
Okay, so there's a gun registry where Michigan is one of the few states that has essentially fixed the loophole in the federal law that says guns purchased at gun shows don't have to be reported. Michigan states otherwise, that their legislation says that any gun sales have to be registered with state authorities, including those at gun shows. The NRA is trying to eliminate that legislation.
What was the spree part of that?
Well, the police in Michigan have stated that actual gun registry has helped solve a series of 24 shootings by linking the type of gun used to those owners who had registered that type of weapon, and were able to trace it back to the criminal that caused that went on the 24 shooting spree.
So the NRA is all in favor of shooting sprees.
Yes, and they're coming out and doing this right after a horrible murder-suicide tragedy. They're making this their biggest priority, to make guns easier to get.
That's their goal.
Yes.
They represent gun makers, so.
And wouldn't you guess what organization is behind all of it?
PTA?
Let's hope things haven't gotten that bad in this country. ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Committee. Yes. This is model legislation put forth by ALEC to eliminate gun laws and push for more states to have the shoot first, ask questions later type legislation seen in Florida and several other states. And so they have drafted this legislation, pushed it forward in Michigan's state legislature. It has passed the Michigan House, currently stalled in their Senate, and Governor Rick Snyder has said he will not sign the law. However, recent events in Michigan that we're going to get into in just a few minutes give us pause to think
that he's going to do what he said?
Yeah.
He's too busy doing things that he said he wasn't going to do.
Exactly. His track record isn't so great with keeping his word on the situation. So we are going to get into that and so much more. We have great guests coming up today. Bo Hodai, David Bender, Angelo Carasone, and Jacob Dean. It's going to be a big show, so don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, on We Act Radio, SoFloRadio.com, and of course, TalkingLeft.com. Stick around.
What kind of a crazy world is this?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Okay, astronaut, you're up. You'll be meeting with Wish Kid Brandon.
Roger, Brandon.
His wish is to see a space shuttle launch.
All systems are go. We are clear for liftoff.
This year, more than 27,000 children will be diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition.
And Cowboy,
Yes, ma'am.
you'll be meeting with Shayla at a dude ranch in San Antonio.
Let's saddle up.
Some will miss school, some will miss time with their family and friends.
Princess, are you here?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for rescuing me from that evil witch.
Juliana wishes for a princess-themed room makeover.
That sounds magical.
But with your help, the Make-A-Wish Foundation can lift their spirits and give them a special kind of hope.
Pirate,
Yar!
you're up for Isaac's wish.
Aye, aye, Captain.
The wishes of thousands of children are waiting to come true.
You can help make my wish happen. Visit wish.org today.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from bradblog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of bradblog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m., right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK, and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
Hank Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas, Kwanzaa. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas, Kwanzaa.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Talking Left. You know, Shano, it is, I think, too early still to be playing Christmas music.
Tough.
I do like that one, though. It's all inclusive. Merry Christmas, I can't even say it.
Merry Christmas, Hana Kwanzaa.
Thank you.
And the thing is that when it comes right down to it, because we're going to be out of town the 2 days before Christmas, we have this show and we have next show and then it's Christmas. So I got 2 shows for Christmas songs. So
yes,
you're getting some.
We're getting some.
Yes, we will. Getting all Christmas. I'm sorry.
We will be featuring a best of for the week of Christmas, but we will be doing a live show here for the New Year's show.
Yeah,
I think it's the 30th.
Yeah, it'll be the 30th, and because we'll get the top 10 quotes of the year. We'll get the audio of those. I always like doing that on, because there's a university I think up in Michigan that does the top 10 quotes of the year. And
we'll have fun with that.
Yeah.
If anybody else has some year of suggestions,
some year end things.
Yeah, I was thinking we should maybe get together a year of great activism.
Okay.
I would love to feature stories, maybe
like a year of ups and downs.
Yeah,
and I got to do the down stuff too.
And people who really fought like hell and made a change.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I would like to do that. So if anybody wants to nominate some great activists, whether we can speak with them or just feature their work, feel free to email us at talkingleft@gmail.com or leave us a message on Facebook or Twitter at Talking Left. We'd love to hear your suggestions and feature people for some great work. Like the activists and the protesters who are fighting like hell in Michigan right now, despite the fact that ALEC-inspired union bill there has essentially passed regardless.
Right.
This makes me very sad. It's hard to talk about.
Well, it's, Indiana was, I think, most recent.
Well,
now what you're talking about is the right to...
The right to work law, which essentially says that unions can't require people to pay dues. But what it does is cripple the unions and typically lower wages and benefits and, worsen working conditions for all workers in the state. Coming from Florida, I can tell you the results of a right to work law, because there we call it the right to work for nothing law.
A right to fire.
Yes. But cheers to the protesters in this situation who were pepper sprayed and arrested in an attempt to keep democracy going in their state. This law was essentially talked about and passed in the dead of night, and it was rammed through the House and the Senate without any true democratic process. No open forums, open meeting, public comment were allowed on the bill. It was introduced at 11 a.m., and it had gone through the Senate by 6 p.m. the same day.
It's amazing how quickly they can enact legislation that's really crappy.
Yes.
But when it comes to good legislation, oh, that takes too long. We have to debate this. Let's put it back through committee and then another committee. It takes a long time to make change. Boy, when they want to make that type of change, they fire it through.
And they don't
and they didn't run on this, right?
No, in fact, they ran against it. Rick Snyder specifically said that he would not target unions and would not go for a right-to-work law. And many people, including this author here on PR Watch, for some reason, when I print them, it always blacks out the person's name. So I'm trying to credit somebody, but their name is not here. They are specifically saying that this is political payback for the unions that had attempted to protect themselves by changing the Constitution in an unsuccessful ballot measure this past fall, giving unions more strength. So essentially, Rick Snyder is pissed off that the unions fought him, and he's taking it out on them. And ALEC, as usual, American Legislative Exchange Council, is right there to provide the model legislation for this bill. It was pushed through by senators such as Arlen Meekoff, Tom McMillan, and Pete Lund, who are all ALEC members. And, you know, this essentially is a carbon copy of the model bill listed on ALEC's website, which is the right to work law. And as many people call it the right to work for less, as I call it the right to work for nothing law. Unions, regardless of what some people on the right may try to have you believe, unions have provided a lot more than just better benefits, including, you know, regular working hours, safe working conditions, rights for employees to have fairness and equality at work. And the country as a whole needs to be standing up against legislation like this. And I would really like to see Obama and the Justice Department try and prevent this from getting passed.
I don't see how.
I don't see how either, but
there was a successful movement in Ohio just last year to battle back against a union busting bill. You know, so there are ways. You know, even though they sneak it in and things like that, there are ways. I understand you're reacting, but how else can you handle something? You have to react when it comes out of nowhere like this.
Right, and protesters here are doing the best they can, because not only was this law snuck through and passed quickly, it was done so with a portion of the bill designed to keep it from being repealed by popular amendment.
That actually is a problem.
So
I don't think that's constitutional.
They've written it in such a way that the popular vote cannot undo it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That really puts an interesting, because they saw what happened in Ohio. They don't want that to happen.
Exactly.
They don't want democracy to actually work. Come on.
Yeah, so you know what? Get mad in the streets, and to those of you who got arrested and pepper sprayed, you are heroes.
If a popular vote type of thing is in the Constitution, I can't imagine how you can write a bill that reverses what's in the Constitution.
Well, maybe that's a way they can fix it.
Well, they can definitely tie it up in the courts for a while they decide that too. That's probably more of the...
Well, we have much more coming up. We have Bo Hodai of DBA Press, a real investigative journalist, talking about what other nonsense ALEC is getting up to around the country. They are as bad as they get, and Bo Hodai does a great job reporting on it. We'll be right back with his interview coming up next on Talking Left.
All down the line. And if you come to strip our rights away, we'll give you hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line. Today the policeman's a union man, for the firefighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the cab.
John Boehner is in a hot huff, fuming so furiously that he'd be red-faced were it not for that eerie orange-toned tan that he constantly has. The Republican House Speaker is angry that President Obama won't play Boehner ball with him in their ongoing altercation over ways to reduce the federal deficit. The GOP leader's pitch to Obama is that the deficit hole should be filled by cutting government spending and eliminating some tax deductions, not, most emphatically not, by increasing taxes on corporations and the rich, even by so little as a dime. But this is an ethos pitch, a soccer ball. The trick is that Boehner and company want Democrats and the general public to agree to massive cuts without telling us which programs and deductions they would sacrifice. So far, Obama is refusing to go for this game of Boehner ball, instead standing firm and calmly saying to him, if you want to spare the rich any burden and only cut back on regular folks, don't expect me to do your dirty work for you. Make your pitch and take political responsibility for the pain you would cause. Oh, the huffing and puffing that ensued. We've put a serious offer on the table, wailed Boehner to the right-wing friendlies interviewing him on Fox TV. Only he hadn't. Not one specific cut had been named. So Obama still refused to be suckered into playing Boehner's game. This is Jim Hightower saying, with polls showing rising public scorn for his pitiful performance, Boehner has finally been forced to try another pitch. But even with a do-over, he balked. His latest proposal cuts $1.2 trillion from federal programs and eliminates $800 billion in tax exemptions, but still doesn't tell us which ones. As Casey Stengel asked the players of a terrible ball club he once managed, can't anyone here play this game?
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. With budget talks stalemated for now in Washington, President Obama holding the line, insisting on tax increases for the top 2%, economist Dean Baker is urging people to calm down about the so-called fiscal cliff.
A lot of people in Washington are really trying to hype it, certainly the term itself, fiscal cliff, we're going to fall off the edge. It's almost impossible to imagine a scenario come, whether it's January 5th, January 10th, you don't see a deal pretty quickly between the President and Congress. They get tax rates back down to the current levels for the rest of us. And, for the top 2%, that's what we had the election over. They're going to pay higher taxes.
Baker says Social Security is fine far into the future, while raising the cap on income subject to the Social Security tax would close any funding gaps in decades to come. He says Medicare can be sustained, but we have to bring health care costs down. And he says raising wages while narrowing income inequality would go a long way toward fixing budget imbalances.
Now, over a long term, we should be seeing wage growth. The longer-term problem, certainly, the fact that the winners, the beneficiaries of economic growth have been almost exclusively those at the top end over the last 3 decades, that's a really big deal. I mean, that's created the sort of imbalances that got us into this.
Walmart could make a massive contribution to the U.S. economy simply by giving its workers a small wage increase. Jesse Russell reports.
Increasing the wages of workers who earn $21,000 on average per year to $25,000 per year would lift 700,000 Americans above the poverty line. That's according to a study released by the think tank Demos, which focused specifically on the low wages of the retail sector. The study shows that giving what amounts to a 27% raise to workers at companies which employ 1,000 workers or more would have a ripple effect, impacting more than 5 million retail workers and their families. Nearly 770,000 workers currently just above the poverty line would see their incomes rise 150% above that line. According to Demos, such an increase would see the GDP rise by between $11.8 billion and $15.2 billion next year. The overall growth from increased spending power would allow for the creation of an additional 100,000 to 132,000 jobs.
The Coalition Against Segregation of Temporary Employees, CAST, is filing a class action discrimination suit in Chicago today, alleging that Johnson & Johnson supplier VPAC Inc. is systematically discriminating against African Americans in temporary agency hiring. After they file the suit, activists will inform shoppers at the Chicago-Austin Walmart about the alleged discrimination. Supporting actions are also being held by worker activists today in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and in Los Angeles. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions,
How high can you jump?
but you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade.
Welcome back to Talking Left. Hope everybody out there is enjoying the program so far. Joining us now, investigative journalist for many sites, but especially dbapress.com, is Bo Hodai. Bo, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really, really excited to have somebody covering such an important issue.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Last week on the program, we actually talked about your article, the Corrections Corporations of America being used in drug raids in public education and public schools. Before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about DBA Press and how you're involved there?
I started DBA Press actually technically I founded it on Christmas of 2010, and so it's almost 2 year old now. And it went live in January of 2011. And it's basically a news publication and primarily and more importantly a source materials archive. I try to stockpile basically as much source material behind each story as I possibly can on the site. And that was basically a response to somebody involved in the private corrections industry, as a matter of fact, who had threatened to sue a publication. I had written a story on them. And so the idea is, you know, it's harder to dispute factual claims if every iota of source material is provided to the public.
Well, absolutely. And I see that the information you have provided there is exceptionally well-researched, well-documented, and explained like a true investigative journalist. And that's something I think we don't get enough of these days. People are so used to the corporate news media summarizing things for them, projecting a specific bias on one side or the other. And your articles that I've read here don't do that. I mean, it's clear where you stand, but you write and you present the information as a true journalist, and I just first and foremost want to commend you for that.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
Absolutely. Now, we covered this issue of drug raids being done by CCA a little bit last week, but explain for our listeners this amazing piece dated November 27th. It's on dbapress.com. By Bo Hodai, who we're speaking with, and it's entitled Corrections Corporations of America Used in Drug Sweeps of Public School Students. How did you, get tipped off on this story?
Well, the piece is actually a sort of a collaboration between three outlets, which is the Center for Media and Democracy, Prison Legal News, and DBA Press. And Alex Friedman, who's the associate editor of Prison Legal News, contributed to the research and the interviewing of that article as well. And Alex is the vice president of the Private Corrections Working Group. And the Private Corrections Working Group field organizer, Frank Smith, actually sent me a link to an article that I believe was in the Casa Grande Valley Dispatch. And it was a very short article that appeared, I think it was on November 1st, the day after the raid, and it was, it was only like 2 paragraphs long, and it's, basically stated that a drug raid had occurred at the Vista Grande High School in Casa Grande, and that I believe it stated that the Arizona Department of Public Safety, the Casa Grande Police, the Gila River Indian Community, and the Corrections Corporation of America were involved in the raid. That was it. That's where the article ended. It was basically just a piece of bulletin news.
Wow.
And so we started looking at it because, it's pretty unprecedented to be using, at least in my knowledge and everybody who I worked with, in all of our collective knowledge, we had not previously heard of CCA or any other private corrections corporation engaging in actual police-type activity.
Yeah, I certainly haven't, and I know they have a big presence in Florida, where I'm originally from. Right. In addition to public school students being treated like criminals, which is essentially at play here, CCA is not a law enforcement agency. They are a private for-profit corporation that is making money off of imprisoning people. Wouldn't you consider that a conflict of interest?
Yeah, and I certainly am not the only person that, that considers that to be a conflict of interest. Given the simple fact that CCA does earn over $1 billion a year, actually well over $1.5 billion a year from the incarceration of human beings, and the real bad part of this, the truly bad circumstance, is that over the past 2 decades, CCA actually has been involved in ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, through Criminal Justice and later Public Safety and Elections Task Force, which has been so instrumental in disseminating, various pieces of tough-on-crime legislation nationwide, and foremost among those are the stringent sentencing requirements, such as truth in sentencing, wherein somebody convicted of a criminal offense would have to serve 85% of their term before even being eligible for any type of release.
And you were actually just touched on what my next question was going to be, and that's the involvement of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that I think, I would guess that most of our listeners are familiar with it, but for anybody who's not, can you briefly explain ALEC and how they're involved with legislation like this and corporations like CCA, Corrections Corporations of America?
Right. So basically what ALEC builds itself basically as a nonpartisan group where private sector members get together with public sector members, and they exchange good ideas on governance. Basically, the type of governance specifically is built around concept of the concept of limited federal involvement in state matters. However, if you look at the reality of what ALEC is, you see what is basically hundreds of private sector members, which are corporations, think tanks, and the think tanks often are funded by the Kochs. It's the Koch right-wing network of think tanks, as well as lobby firms and law firms that work for a myriad other corporate interests. And so what occurs with ALEC is that these private interests sit down at meetings at these task forces, and the task forces are broken over a number of different matters of public policy, be it education or criminal justice. And so they sit down on these task forces with private sector members, which are our state lawmakers,
right,
and they come up with pieces of model legislation, to use our own term for it. And then once the task force approves or adopts a piece of model legislation, it's then given out by that task force to all ALEC members as something that they might like to take home to their home assemblies and introduce to try to get passed into law. And oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I think most people are aware, who are familiar with ALEC, are aware of ALEC's involvement in legislation such as the 3 strikes you're out, or as you mentioned, the truth in sentencing legislation. But what may come as a big surprise, it certainly did to me, is their involvement in the Drug-Free Schools Act, which you write about in this article. Were you surprised by that, or did you kind of expect that they had their hand in that pie as well?
No, I wasn't surprised by that. It just seems I've been working on ALEC for I think like 3 years or over 3 years now, And I've sort of come to expect that any sort of draconian piece of criminal justice legislation has passed through ALEC in one form or another. And so basically the Drug-Free Schools Act, that act would encourage the greater involvement of, that piece of model legislation would encourage the greater involvement of law enforcement entities in the school place, where children are supposed to be receiving their education. There was another one, another piece of model legislation, the Drug-Free School Zone, which ALEC seems to have been involved in to some degree, but it's unclear as to whether that model legislation actually originated with ALEC or if it was something that ALEC simply supported. But that piece of model legislation was the one that also resulted in the tough sentencing enhancements for any sort of drug offense committed within, whatever the given radius of the school zone may be, be it 500 feet, 1,000 feet.
Absolutely. And we are speaking, just to remind everybody, with Bo Hodai. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes.
Okay. Of Bo Hodai of DBA Press, which you can check out this article, so many more as well at dbapress.com. ALEC being involved in this type of legislation among so many other pieces of legislation, and then kind of working hand in hand with corporations like Corrections Corporation of America. Obviously, to me, I certainly won't speak for you being a journalist, but this represents another conflict of interest where you have legislation essentially drafted and put forward by those who stand to profit from it, like drug-free or drug regulation that essentially puts more people in prison, thus contributing to the profits of Corrections Corporations of America. Now, most people have constantly heard that the for-profit prison industry is there to save the taxpayer money. But a recent article that you put forward by Carolyn Isaacs on DBA Press states clearly otherwise.
Right.
Can you explain that a little bit for people?
Yeah, Caroline is somebody. She's the program director of the American Friends Service Committee office in Tucson, and she has been a tireless opponent of private prison industry expansion within this state. And this state is really, if you look at the attention that CCA, for example, has paid to Arizona, it's like the flagship of private prison expansion.
Oh, yeah.
And so what Caroline found was that based on internal ADC, which is the Arizona Department of Corrections documents, and their own reports that they've issued, that the Arizona Department of Corrections and other members of the Arizona government, it was clear to them that the private corrections industry was not saving them money. And she would really be much more qualified than I to go into all of the details because she wrote the article. But that's the gist of it. And so what basically happened is earlier this year, the Arizona House, through the Criminal Justice Budget Reconciliation Act of fiscal 2012-2013, scrapped a longstanding provision of Arizona law that would require biennial cost comparison reports of private prisons, basically, to determine if they are in fact saving the Arizona taxpayers money. And so the gist of what Caroline's research in her article shows is that they had all of the data that they needed to know that the private prison industry was not saving taxpayers money, but that they went ahead and scrapped that provision of Arizona revised statutes saying that we should do these studies. They scrapped it, and then in September, the state went ahead and issued 1,000 new beds, a new 1,000-bed contract to CCA.
It's really astounding. Bo Hodai, based on the amazing work you and Carolyn over at DBA Press have done, it's really eye-opening how invasive ALEC is to our culture, and in this case now getting all the way into the lives of our children. Thank you very much for taking time with us today and helping us sort through the details. I know we could we could talk for an hour about this, but thank you very much for spending a few minutes and helping us understand all of it and the amazing work you do and everybody there at DBA Press.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bo Hodai, everybody, dbapress.com. We will be right back with more right here on Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Stick.
This is going to be fun. It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Are you living in a progressive talk void? If so, be sure to visit leftwingradiosstations.com. The state-by-state listing is a quick and easy way to find any left-wing talk radio station across America, from sea to shining sea. Your progressive talk nirvana is only a click away at leftwingradiosstations.com. Be sure to like Left-Wing Radio Stations on Facebook and share it with your friends. Leftwingradiosstations.com. United we stand.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen, investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from BradBlog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of BradBlog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m. right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hi, this is Tom Hartman.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster of Take Action News.
I'm Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com.
Hi, I'm cartoonist and agent provocateur P.S. Mueller.
This is Nicole Bell of crooksandliars.com, and this is...
You're listening to
and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
You can't have for-profit programming in the public good. That's a contradiction. Because realistically, if it's for the public good, then it can't also be for-profit. That's sort of the notion of why we need more PBS and NPR and nonprofit co-ops and whatever you can find in terms of nonprofit media. It's sort of what we're doing here. And, there's no real reason to make money off this, because if we did, it would really conflict with what we're saying.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
Arr, mateys. Welcome to the ocean. I've sailed the seven seas 100 times and found something I like even more than me treasure. 'Tis the ocean, beautiful and clear. Right now I be sailing over the Great Barrier Reef. It just shivers me timbers thinking of all the fish and coral below me. Wait, what's that floating by? The plastic bag! By Blackbeard's eye patch, that's disgusting. Why did you know that many of these things come from folks throwing them carelessly on the ground? It be true. Lend us a hand by always recycling and disposing of your trash properly. Boys, get the plank ready. Somebody's got to dive in and get that bag. Any volunteers? All right, fine. I'll do it myself. Cannonball! Find out what you can do to help keep the oceans healthy at keepoceansclean.org. Brought to you by the Keep Oceans Clean Alliance and the Ad Council.
SoFloRadio.com remains on the air with free archives thanks to the support of our listeners. Help keep us on the air by clicking the donate button on SoFloRadio.com. And thank you for your generous support.
Now everybody do the propaganda and sing along at the age of paranoia. Welcome to a new kind of tension all across the alien mission. Everything is meant to be okay. Television dreams of tomorrow.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Big thanks to Bo Hodai of DBApress.com for that awesome interview and the awesome in-depth journalism he does over at DBApress.com. I imagine you may hear more of him on Talking Left, and we're really, really happy he could join us. In news this Thursday. Unprecedented news. Surprisingly unprecedented, actually. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell attempted to embarrass the Democrats. Didn't work out so well.
No. Who do you end up embarrassing?
Himself? Yes. The Kentucky Republican proposed a vote changing the nation's debt ceiling, allowing the president himself to control whether or not the debt ceiling is raised, and requiring a 2/3 majority in order to dispute whether or not it should be done if, in fact, he said it should.
So it changed the burden.
Right, from him to, from Congress to the president.
Right, so, because they inevitably will, invoke cloture when it comes to raising it. Instead, it's going to go up unless, instead of it's only going to go up.
Well, it would be in his hands. If he decided not to raise it, the same could be said.
Right.
Which a bill like that could backfire on the Democrats as well if that power was given to a Republican president that said no on raising the debt ceiling.
Sure.
So,
and Dick Durbin had a comment about this.
Right.
So this may be a moment in Senate history when a senator made a proposal and when given an opportunity for a vote on that proposal, filibustered his own proposal. I think we have now reached a new spot in the history of the Senate we've never seen before. I'm going to ask the parliamentarian to really look into this. I don't think this has ever happened before, but it really calls into question whether or not this was the kind of offer that one would consider to be good faith.
Yes. Essentially, Mitch McConnell thought that the Democrats would never vote for a bill, and then he could use the vote, or lack thereof, the refusal to allow this bill to be voted on, as evidence that even Democrats don't think the president should have more power when it comes to the debt ceiling. However, Harry Reid first objected to the idea and then came back and said, you know what? Let's put it to a simple up and down vote.
In 20 minutes.
In 20 minutes.
I'm calling your bluff.
I'm calling your bluff. And Mitch McConnell was then forced to filibuster himself.
Object.
Object to my own bill. Object.
Object.
Yes. Well, shoot.
I fold.
So, Talking Left is here to hypothesize that Mitch McConnell may have a mental disorder.
We've been doing this a lot.
Yes.
Armchair analyzing.
Because it's fun.
I think a lot of people have watched the show ER and have heard about Munchausen syndrome.
I would think so.
Well, Munchausen syndrome, they always talk about Munchausen by proxy. Munchausen syndrome is when you actually inflict harm upon yourself to gain sympathy. I think that's what the Republicans are doing. They just keep smacking themselves in the head with everything they do. In the election, no matter what they do, they keep beating themselves up. Why do you keep hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? And then they say, oh, the poor Republicans. It is to garnish. I don't know how else to explain how, other than pure ineptitude, which is equally as probably more.
Probably more probable.
But Munchausen's is fun.
Yes. So we are here to hypothesize, not being medical professionals in any regard.
Like Keith the Blow?
Yes. That Mitch McConnell has Munchausen syndrome.
The whole Republican Party.
Yes.
Self-inflicted wounds.
They like to injure themselves, it appears, for the sake of attention. And you know darn well that now we will hear from Mitch McConnell, see, we can't get anything passed in the Senate. Nothing happens. The Democrats won't allow any of our bills to the floor. Oh, shoot. Well, that was me.
Darn.
Good job, Mitch McConnell, for giving us more comedic relief.
We had Governor Goodhair. Oops. Now we have oops.
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 Oops. Oh, it is fun. It is fun to point out the stupidity. They just give it to us all on a silver platter. We've got that and so much more, and we're going to get into some more serious charges, possibly, that should be brought up about the GOP. Don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, on We Act Radio, SoFloRadio.com, and, of course, RadioOrNot.com. We'll be right back. Stick around.
It's December 4, 2012.
The window of opportunity to avoid dangerous warming is closing.
Time is running out at the UN climate talks.
On the 3rd of December, temperatures in the plains and Midwest are kind of unnerving.
Record winter heat blasts the Midwest.
This state and this delegation has been there for other parts of the country when they needed help, and we expect the same.
In the midst of so-called fiscal cliff talks, New York asks for disaster funds, plus cannibal lobsters. Yep. Cannibal lobsters.
Melt up your butter now. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Today's snarky comment, courtesy of physicist Richard Alley, who asks, how many climate change deniers does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know, Brad. How many climate change deniers does it take to change a light bulb?
None. It's a natural cycle. It'll just turn back on. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Des, I don't mean to say I told you so, but with the UN climate talks now wrapping up in Doha, Qatar, here is how we reported what would happen 2 weeks ago on this broadcast.
The next round of UN International Climate Treaty negotiations that begin next week in Doha, Qatar.
The next round of UN negotiations begins next week?
Yes, they do.
Why don't they get together earlier and start not accomplishing anything right now?
That's a good point.
Well, was it a good point?
Yes, actually, they are still having trouble reaching any kind of intermediate agreement.
Who could have guessed it?
Well, you did.
Leaders of the world! Leaders of the world! It's time to commit! It's time to commit! Climate justice! Climate justice! Climate justice! Climate justice!
Amid what was said to be the first ever protest of any kind in the tiny oil nation of Qatar, time is now running out to make measurable progress at the UN climate talks going on right now in Doha. High-level government ministers have now arrived to attempt major intermediate goals on the path to a comprehensive treaty in 2015. They're looking at trying to extend the Kyoto protocols that expire in December and increase funding of the Green Climate Fund, where rich nations assist poor nations with adapting to the accelerating impacts of climate change. But that window is closing, as UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon warned on Monday.
Climate change is a growing crisis. The window of opportunity to avoid dangerous warming is closing. It is not too late, but our actions need to match the scale of the challenge.
Secretary General Moon noted a new report showing levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide are now at record highs, with China, now the world's biggest emitter overall, jumping 10% over last year's emissions, meaning that without action, the world is now on track to lock in global temperature rise of at least 4 degrees Celsius or higher by the end of this century. That equates to about 9 degrees Fahrenheit, double the 2 degrees Celsius warming that is generally considered the danger threshold by climate scientists. Another study shows that melting of the Greenland and Antarctica ice sheets has accelerated 3 times faster than it was just 20 years ago. And sea levels are now projected to rise 3 feet or more by the end of this century if no action is taken. Rising sea levels mean stronger storm surges, meaning more expensive disasters now, as New Yorkers found out with Superstorm Sandy. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo on Monday sought additional disaster and recovery funding from Congress. In a press conference with Governor Cuomo, New York Senator Charles Schumer pressured Congress to move quickly.
We are reminding our colleagues that New York was there when Missouri had tornadoes and North Dakota had floods and Colorado had firestorms and, of course, the Gulf area had hurricanes. And now we need you.
The governors of New York and New Jersey together are requesting over $80 billion in federal assistance for recovery and to prepare the region's crucial infrastructure to withstand future storms and sea level rise. Meanwhile, an outbreak of record warm weather is bringing summer and winter to the Midwest.
Again.
40 states having highs this afternoon. 10 to 30 degrees above average. We had 200 records set over the weekend. Today, more records went by the wayside.
This is exactly what we saw last winter.
Indeed it is. And while people enjoy the warm weather in winter, the drawback is warm winter means little snow and, like last year, will deepen the already deep drought across the Midwest. Finally, we reported recently on the boom in lobster populations due to unusually warm ocean temperatures off the coast of Maine. But it turns out the boom is not just hurting the lobstermen with rock-bottom prices. More lobsters than ever, combined with human overfishing of their main food sources, means the lobsters have turned to eating each other. Lobster cannibalism.
Well, they are delicious. I guess they just found out themselves how delicious they are. For more on that story and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help sponsor the Green News Report. We rely only on you to stay on your public airwaves. You can download our broadcast anytime via iTunes, listen to us on your mobile device via Stitcher Radio, follow us 24/7 on the Twitters, and find us and like us on the Facebook. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Hope everybody out there is having a lovely, lovely Sunday morning. So, some people may have missed the big news this week, but we need to set this one up for you. According to Britannica Online Encyclopedia,
Is that really where you went for your definition?
Yes.
Why not just go to Wikipedia while you're at it? Okay, go ahead.
Come on, it's an encyclopedia. It's better than Wikipedia. At least it can't be edited.
18 USC, the 15th chapter might have been a little better, but okay, go ahead.
Okay. Bribery is the act of promising, giving, receiving, or agreeing to receive money or some other item of value with the corrupt aim of influencing a public official in the discharge of his official duties. When money has been offered or promised in the exchange for a corrupt act, the official involved need not actually accomplish that act for the offense of bribery to be complete. So, I would think, Shane, that $150 million is a pretty damn big case of bribery.
Sure.
I mean, it's definitely a high enough amount to influence the person you're donating it to or giving it to.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
I would think so, too.
You know, yeah. There's a lot of words in there that don't actually appear in the
Okay, do you have the...
I don't have the federal statute in front of me, but the word corruptly they put in there actually isn't in there.
Okay.
You know, there's corruptly or by threats of force or any threatening letter or communication are in there. You can also do it by threat. It essentially comes down to if you're going to bribe somebody, if they're in a position of authority, which government officials are, offering something of value in exchange for them doing something that would be in conflict with their fulfilling their office. So, you know, if it's a congressperson, if it would convince them to do something that they wouldn't normally do as a congressperson, or against what they should do as a congressperson, that really is more the essence of federal bribery.
Yeah, I think corruptly is a bit redundant.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also, it puts that certain amount of intent. And you know, corruptly is a very subjective term.
Right. I think $150 million would surely be enough to influence the outcome or attempt to influence the outcome of any particular event. And that just happens to be the amount that billionaire casino mogul Shelley Adelson spent on the 2012 election. $150 million.
And of even more importance, he's promised a lot more.
Yes, he was quoted specifically that he would double that amount in the next election. I'll spend that much and more, he pledged, let's cut any ambiguity. So he's saying straight out, yes, I will spend more in the next election. And just to give you an idea of how wealthy Mr. Adelson is, he could theoretically spend $500,000 on every single Republican House and Senate nominee for the next 186 years.
Wow.
That's how rich he is. So when he says he can spend more in the next election, he ain't lying.
No doubt.
It just so happens that Mr. Sheldon Adelson is also under investigation in 2 different countries for possibly violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. I'm sure that had nothing to do with why he spent $150 million on Republican candidates, considering that he himself is self-described socially liberal.
So he was trying to get himself into Department of Justice.
Sure, what it sounds like to me. He wanted Romney to win, so a new Department of Justice would be put in place that would possibly drop his investigations.
Which actually is kind of going out on a limb, because just because the Attorney General changes, there are a lot of career assistant attorneys general.
Right.
Who often, because cases don't just stop at a new presidency and then, they hold over, they keep going.
Right. There were
Different people come in and investigate the same case file, et cetera.
There were no promises, but Sheldon Adelson is rich enough that he could spend $150 million on the chance that they would leave him alone.
Yeah.
Well, if that wasn't obvious enough as overt bribery, it gets even better. Sheldon Adelson, this week coming up, is coming to Washington to meet with 3 GOP leaders about possibly changing the law and changing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act so that he would no longer be in violation of it.
In fact, he already did come this past week.
Oh, I thought that was this week.
No.
Oh. Yes. So now he, spending $150 million, pledging to spend more, wasn't enough. Now he's meeting specifically with GOP leaders in an attempt to change the law. Well, if you ask me, those GOP leaders have essentially committed or been part of conspiracy to accept bribes.
Well, just accepting a bribe all on its own. The question is because it comes down to, there's a lot of talk in a lot of cases, when does a campaign contribution become a bribe?
Right.
And a lot of the case law hinges on the quid pro quo, but also when you give a campaign contribution towards a party or you give it towards a candidate, you are contributing to that person as an individual, what they stand for, or a party, what that party stands for. But when you contribute towards a certain goal of changing a law
that you happen to be being investigated for,
then you're getting closer to the bribe area. And then accepting that money or that promise of that money would be accepting a bribe. That's the question. If they come back and they do change this law, or if they do go to the Department of Justice, this really should be looked into.
I think it should absolutely.
No one's saying go about it.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying, "Oh, see how much that money, buys you access." Yes, it buys you access. That's not a new thing. We get robocalls. He gets to sit down with the leaders.
Right.
And that's the 2 sets of justice systems we have in this country. That needs to be worked on, obviously. But this is a specific case where a person's saying, "I'm going to give you $300 million."
Right. Or more.
I'd like to sit down with you and talk about this law I'm being investigated under. Wow. That seems pretty blatant.
Yeah. At what point does that become bribery? And at what point does these leaders meeting with Sheldon Adelson become accepting a bribe?
And how does Citizens United factor into this? Has it encouraged this type of thing? It certainly made it easier.
Absolutely. Because out of the $150 million, 100 of which, just about, was given to so-called dark money sources, 501c4s that don't have to disclose donors. An additional $53 million was given to pro-GOP super PACs that have to report their donations. But the question is, if these leaders meet with Sheldon Adelson, have they not accepted a bribe? Especially If they go to bat for him and they draft legislation to change the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, if they lobby the Department of Justice to stop this investigation, have they not committed the quid pro quo of accepting a bribe for the specific purpose of stopping the investigation against Sheldon Adelson? And if they have, if they do, if they continue to do so, is it not an impeachable offense?
There are a lot of ifs in there.
Of course.
But it's one of those things we should keep an eye on. What happens with this investigation? Now, the problem is you have people in power tend to do things behind closed doors. So it'll be difficult to shed light on who meets with whom, who sends whatever envoy over to another office to say or lobby or this or that. But it's something to keep an eye on and see what happens.
I think it's clearly something that the Department of Justice should be monitoring.
Sure.
According to Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors.
There you have it.
So,
I'd forgotten that was the bribery was
bribery is clearly there, written in the Constitution. The forefathers that the right constantly wants to mention were specifically concerned about the act of bribery and how it could influence legislation, lawmakers, and the democratic process in this country. And here we have a clear demonstration of Sheldon Adelson, who believes in socialized health care, the right for gay people to marry, all of these socially liberal policies, but yet spends $150 million on the party he believes will stop investigating him. And not just that, pledges to double that amount in the next election and has a secret meeting with those he's going to donate to. Sure sounds like bribery to me. Sure sounds like those GOP leaders should be investigated for bribery and possibly impeached for meeting with Sheldon Adelson. Even though we all have our thoughts, we all have our doubts about people like him being able to buy the democratic process, I would at least like our leaders in Washington to pretend like that's not the case.
Yeah, and even if there's no direct evidence, which we certainly don't have yet, other than the meeting itself that was about that act and the money given. We don't know if they've actually acted on this. It certainly brings up the appearance of impropriety.
Yeah, I would really like to see if legislation to change the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act comes forward. And if so, I would like every senator or House member that sponsors and co-sponsors it investigated for bribery.
Amen.
Oh, but a girl
might
can
be
dream.
A bar to it coming up.
Yeah, a girl can dream. Yes. So think about that. Perhaps write your senators, congresspeople letters, give them phone calls, and say that you would like these GOP leaders to be accountable for who they answer to, and remind them it's the American people, not casino mogul billionaire Sheldon Adelson. So we've got so much more coming up. We're going to have Angelo Carasone coming up in just a few minutes to talk about Fox News' changes to the lineup. That and Jacob Dean, David Bender, still lots of show in store, so don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, on We Act Radio, SoFlo Radio, and RadioOrNot.com.
It reflects the drama of the human experience, and isn't that the essence of art?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without big brothers, big sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil, and Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Jane Kuger of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Remind everybody we've got great big guests coming up still later in this show. Angelo Carasone is going to be joining us in the next segment.
Huge.
He of Stop Beck and Stop Fox and Media Matters and all kinds of amazing stuff. You know, Shane, big changes coming up in the Senate.
What?
Jim DeMint will be leaving
Waterloo DeMint?
to head the Heritage Foundation. Yes. For anybody who's not familiar with Jim DeMint, just some...
He's a big Tea Party guy.
He's a big Tea Party something. And a few reasons why you might be glad Jim DeMint is leaving the Senate, including standing with Todd Akin over his legitimate rape comment, including...
Is this out of Think Progress?
Yes.
Yeah.
Including donating to Akin's campaign after that. He led the opposition against Obamacare. He wants to prevent gay or unmarried teachers from teaching in public schools. Yes, that's right. Single women, not allowed to teach. pushed a bill outlawing the discussion of abortion over the internet, wants to strip all federal employees of collective bargaining rights. He blocked creation of the National Women's History Museum. He linked the Chicago teachers to thugs in the Middle East, threatened to single-handedly shut down the Senate, him and everybody else, used a failed terrorist plot to attack unions, and argued that people with pre-existing conditions got better care before Obamacare. Yeah, nice guy.
A real peach.
He is, and he, in fact, is moving to the Heritage Foundation.
So he quit after they didn't take back the Senate.
That would be the case.
And on top of it, we have, what, is it Nikki Haley down in South Carolina? She's South Carolina, right?
Yes.
So get another GOP in there. And I was hoping when I heard the story that Mark Sanford would run. That would be fun. If we can get him back from the Appalachian Trail, come on, run for Senate, Sanford.
Appalachian Trail, Argentinian Tail, sounds the same.
Yeah.
Just 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
So, Senator, one of 100 people in this country, pretty powerful spot.
Yes. Apparently, he doesn't think that's powerful enough. So much so that he's realized he may play an even broader role in the nation's political debate with his new post as president of the Heritage Foundation.
Is the word broader a quoted word?
It is part of an AP article.
Oh, okay. I just wonder if he said that term broader. 'Cause that's a very important word. Is it a broader role? Is it a more important role? Is it a less important role? Is it a more lucrative role?
No,
certainly it's more lucrative.
John Ullyott, Ullyot, a former Senate Republican aide, is quoted saying this platform, the Heritage Foundation, is a much bigger microphone than he has as a junior senator from South Carolina. So essentially...
So he's complaining about being in Lindsey Graham's shadow?
Yes.
Oh.
And the Heritage Foundation, by the way, is thrilled to have him. The current president of the Heritage Foundation called him a shining example of conservative activism.
Wow. Well, the thing is that I think it's a great commentary on where power is now.
Absolutely.
We should do actually a segment or two on power, what power is, and how it's moved.
Yes. He's going essentially from being the puppet of the corporate masters to being one of the puppet masters himself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because, wow, that's when, think tank. We need to change that term for Heritage.
And
when a think tank has more power, but we've seen it over and over again. How many times do we see on television? And Greenwald did such a great job in the film about this. With the Koch brothers exposed, how these think tanks come up with crazy ideas that they want to propel that don't have any facts at all. They find someone to make up a study, then the study goes on the air with their people. Their people say it over and over again until the pundits say it, and then it becomes repeated fact, which is a false one.
Well, an interesting aspect of what you're talking about is leaders in the GOP have been frustrated already with DeMint because of his refusal to compromise on the fiscal cliff, fighting against GOP efforts that have kind of tried to move the party a little bit towards the center. And they're even more frustrated with him now taking this new position. And I think that's evidence that he'll have more power in the Heritage Foundation than he does as a senator.
Frightening.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anyone in the Heritage Foundation is elected by the people.
No, I don't think so. And it's said that he may even move the Heritage Foundation further right, which I didn't think was physically possible, but apparently that's what they are suspecting. So anyhow, we certainly have to run to a break because we can't be late to talk to Angelo Carasone. You can follow him on Twitter at GoAngelo. He'll be coming up next with us right here on Talking Left. Don't go anywhere.
So, who is responsible for these outrages? It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade.
Welcome back to Talking Left. Hope everybody out there is enjoying the program so far. Joining us now, investigative journalist for many sites, but especially dbapress.com, is Bo Hodai. Bo, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really, really excited to have somebody covering such an important issue.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Last week on the program, we actually talked about your article, the Corrections Corporations of America being used in drug raids in public education and public schools. Before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about DBA Press and how you're involved there?
I started DBA Press actually technically I founded it on Christmas of 2010, and so it's almost 2 years old now. And it went live in January of 2011, and it's basically a news publication and primarily and more importantly a source materials archive. I try to stockpile basically as much source material behind each story as I possibly can on the site. And that was basically a response to somebody involved in the private corrections industry, as a matter of fact, who had threatened to sue a publication I had written a story on them. And so the idea is, you know, it's harder to dispute factual claims if every iota of source material is provided to the public.
Well, absolutely, and I see that the information you have provided there is exceptionally well-researched, well-documented, and explained like a true investigative journalist, and that's something I think we don't get enough of these days. People are so used to the corporate news media summarizing things for them, projecting a specific bias on one side or the other, and your articles that I've read here don't do that. I mean, it's clear where you stand, but you write and you present the information as a true journalist, and I just first and foremost want to commend you for that.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
Absolutely. Now, we covered this issue of drug raids being done by CCA a little bit last week, but explain for our listeners this amazing piece dated November 27th. It's on dbapress.com. By Bo Hodai, who we're speaking with, and it's entitled Corrections Corporations of America Used in Drug Sweeps of Public School Students. How did you, get tipped off on this story?
Well, the piece is actually a sort of a collaboration between three outlets, which is the Center for Media and Democracy, Prison Legal News, and DBA Press. And Alex Friedman, who's the associate editor of Prison Legal News, contributed to the research and the interviewing of that article as well. And Alex is the vice president of the Private Corrections Working Group. And the Private Corrections Working Group field organizer, Frank Smith, actually sent me a link to an article that I believe was in the Casa Grande Valley Dispatch. And it was a very short article that appeared, I think it was on November 1st, the day after the raid, and it was, it was only like 2 paragraphs long, and it's, basically stated that a drug raid had occurred at the Vista Grande High School in Casa Grande, and that I believe it stated that the Arizona Department of Public Safety, the Casa Grande Police, the Gila River Indian Community, and the Corrections Corporation of America were involved in the raid. That was it. That's where the article ended. It was basically just a piece of bulletin.
The strike action led to 10 out of 14 of the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach docks creaking to a halt. A handful of ships were stuck in dock and others anchored at sea. Many of those that hadn't arrived yet were diverted to other ports along the coast. As of Wednesday, no details had been released publicly, but one of the primary sticking points was a concern that clerical jobs would be outsourced. The shippers have denied that was a goal in the recent contract negotiations. While federal mediators had been sent to the port, the two sides reached their agreement less than 2 hours after they arrived. The clerks have been without a contract for more than 2 years. An estimated $1 billion in trade was impacted by this strike.
Voting has begun in the union representation election for 9,700 passenger service agents at American Airlines. The Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, says the workers will gain valuable improvements on the job with a union contract. Voting ends January 15th. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It takes 12 years to create a graduate. It takes about the same time to create a dropout. And at the end of the day, the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be you. So United Way is asking you to make a pledge. Tutor a child who needs help. Mentor a kid who needs someone on their side. Volunteer to read to children. Because when a child advances, we all advance. Be a reader, tutor or mentor. Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Take the pledge now at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Unfiltered truth, news, and opinion. Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
You can always go back to Rome and Greece, and let's face it, kingdoms. You know, it wasn't until a couple hundred years ago that we realized that, hey, monarchies don't work. Let's think of another kind of system of governance. You know, it's something a little less hierarchical, if you will, at least concentrated power. Then again, when you're dealing with money, capitalism is about money and the exchange of money, then concentrated power works really well.
Radio or not, and filterfreeradio.com.
Progressives across the country are taking action, from Madison, Wisconsin, to the Occupy movement. And now, Washington, D.C.'s newest talk radio station, We Act Radio. In this election year, Progressive Talk returns to our nation's capital. We Act Radio is proud to showcase the biggest names in Progressive Talk Radio, including Stephanie Miller, Tom Hartman, Bill Press, Ed Schultz, Sam Cedar, and original live shows from our Anacostia studios. Take Action News with David Schuster, Speak Easy with Kamon Freeman and Ron Pinchback, and The Inside Scoop with Mark Levine. Available on your radio dial and on the web at weactradio.com. That's We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. Truth is our product.
Yes, we can.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Hopefully, Angelo Carasone has not overslept, but maybe he will give us a call during this segment, as he was supposed to be on now. But no worries. We can certainly talk about fun stuff without him. In case you missed it, there's some interesting news going on over at Fox. After his so-called temper tantrum, I'd say pretty obvious temper tantrum, Karl Rove has essentially been blacklisted. He and Dick Morris are now on a special list, according to Rupert Murdoch, that must be approved before they are allowed back on air. I think that's really interesting. In the Republican Party's effort to appear more centrist, two of the worst, Karl Rove and Dick Morris, aren't welcome there. Now, I don't know what that says about Sarah Palin being built her own studio up in Alaska, but perhaps she's just easier to manipulate. And this is a big change on Fox. You know, the media arm of the right-wing party making some big changes to remove the architect of conservative values off the air, as well as the notably always wrong about everything Dick Morris.
Could it be that Fox News is losing some of its influence? I'm wondering, because a lot of them over there, at least in the opinion side, are trying to push the you weren't conservative enough, let's get more conservative.
Yes.
Yet they are doing the same, a purge of the people who were wrong. And on top of it, the ratings are down.
Big time.
And so I'm just wondering, they still are the propaganda wing of the Republican Party, but do they have the influence anymore after craziness like Rove, and are they trying to repair that reputation by getting rid of them for a while? We also have Newt Gingrich, who used to be a contributor. Then when he ran for president, he had to leave. He hasn't gone back.
I'll be interested to see who's on the Sunday shows today, as we, DVR them every week. I think it used to be that Fox could manipulate the party. While they were the propaganda wing, they could simply say it be a certain way, and many of the commentators and the politicians would go along with that. And I think what we saw this time is that same effect didn't hold true, where politicians that went against them stayed in office, and politicians that went right along with their extreme hard right-wing stance lost this election.
Could an argument be made, and I think it could, that you do remember the primary process for the GOP and picking their presidential nominee? It went through a lot of different people in pretty much rapid fire. Did Fox News contribute to that? Because it's a widely held belief that them beating up on one another and having, new, people, being the leader of the pack every couple weeks was damaging overall to the GOP brand when it came to the general election.
I think so. And I think even the most hard right viewer probably feels pretty lied to and cheated after Fox and people like Karl Rove and Dick Morris assured them over and over and over again that Romney was going to win the nomination, win the presidency, and
we read some
failed to be
we
correct.
read some of the comments.
Yes.
Over on some of the conservative websites, saying, I've been lied to, you guys are just pocketing the money. And we even had Dick Morris come out saying, well, I was just trying to be a cheerleader because I actually thought he was losing, but I wanted to say he was winning so everyone would have a positive attitude and go out and vote. I was trying to gin up the vote. Well, that's not your job.
Right.
You're supposed to be, an analyst, according, in the Fox world, an analyst who's a pollster, who gives data. So he essentially was saying, I was fudging the data.
Well, I think this goes right along with what we were talking about last week. Are we going to see a split in the Republican Party? Those that want the really hard right, the Tea Party, ultra-conservatives, stay out of my life except for any abortion, right to work, women's health-related issues, and those that realize in order to maintain any power whatsoever as a party and as a propaganda machine, you have to start courting those that are more towards the center.
Could the divide that's occurring at Fox be reflective of what's going on in the party itself? More evidence that Fox News just is the GOP.
I really think so. I mean, you have Roger Ailes, who has now limited Rove and Dick Morris, saying that for the time being, that they must be approved before they can get on air. And, he's a wealthy guy. As much as we might not like him, he's intelligent enough to realize what's good for his business and where the profits are going to come from. And to me, he's clearly indicating that those hard right policies are not what Fox News, for the most part, is going to be promoting. I mean, we still have Hannity and the crazier ones. But will we see Fox News try and move a little to the center and say, see, we're right where you are?
Or could it just be kind of window dressing?
Yeah, that would probably be where my gut would be, window dressing.
It's interesting to know where is the power center there, because when it comes right down to it, Roger Ailes can be fired too.
Yeah.
He's the head of news, but Rupert wants to make money first and foremost. He's not lied about this. I think he's even been quoted saying, if I could do this in liberal, I would do it.
Well, I think that this comes as somewhat good news, Rove and Morris being off the air, as a great interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was just posted on Democratic Underground yesterday, in which Kennedy told HuffPost Live, quote, it's, referring to Fox News, divided our country in a way that we haven't been divided probably since the Civil War, and it's empowered large corporations to get certain kinds of politicians and ideologues who are in the United States elected, the Tea Party ideologues. So here's a man who has been involved with politics and understood the process since he was born. And he sees a real danger in Fox News and these conservative media outlets that are damaging the country. So perhaps this came at a right time, and Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch are, I don't know if I would go as far as giving them credit in worrying about the damage to the country.
They're certainly worried about the party.
Right. They're certainly worried about the party, and they're certainly worried about their profits.
Yeah. And it's funny to watch because over the holidays you get a lot of fill-in hosts, and they get to do the talking points memos or things like that. And I would say at least half the time it's a talking point about finding ourselves again. Who is going to be our leader, meaning the GOP? You know, what core values, how are we going to, they're really worried.
Yeah, as well they should be.
Positively, this is the opportunity to do blah, 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 but it's more of, oh no, what are we going to do? So they're very aware of it.
Yeah. Still just does not explain to me why Sarah Palin was just built her own studio.
I don't know.
For the life of me, I just don't understand why anybody cares what that woman has to say.
To keep her from flying to New York.
Perhaps you just nailed it there, Shano. Yes. So just to remind everybody, although we apparently missed Angelo, we will still be speaking with David Bender of Progressive Voices and Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio. So
Jacob Dean's on his way in the
he's
studio.
on his way. He's going to be in studio with us, and I'm very excited about that. It should still be a really fun show, talking about fun stuff like pot legalization. Congratulations to Seattle for their accomplishment, and we'll have to wait and see how it's going to turn out. And so much more. A big announcement apparently later in the show, but we don't know what it is yet. Isn't that what David Bender said? Big news?
Well, he said he had something to say. And, David Bender's the type, when he says he has something to say, I don't even ask what it is. I'm like,
no.
Yep.
No, we don't need to know what it is. You're welcome here.
Because no matter what, it's going to be correct.
Yeah.
Well, I should have pulled up his audio from a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he's always right.
Yeah.
Just
but he knows that. So.
What he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just while we have a second here, I want to remind everybody to check out all the great shows over on We Act Radio, as well as SoFloRadio.com and RadioOrNot.com. So much awesome news everywhere for free, available to you wherever you are. So no excuse for not listening. We're going to come right back with more here on Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Stick around.
Holy crap! We'll have more on these new developments after this.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or Not.
Radio or Not.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Bill Maher, you're here in Miami on Friday night. You're doing a show at the Fillmore at the Jackie Gleason Theater. They just renamed this theater the Fillmore. And they put up a couple of psychedelic posters. So I guess...
Is it the theater Jackie did his TV show from?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
What I hear they did is put up two of those old Bill Graham posters and renamed it.
Yeah, I can't think of two different icons of show business.
Yeah, really.
Bill Graham and Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, why they just didn't play up the Jackie Gleason aspect, I don't know. But then again, this is South Florida.
Right. Okay.
Welcome to it.
I feel warned.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
Hi, this is Kenny Pick from Turn Up the Night. Here are some of the hijinks you can expect from my show.
That right-wing Republican from Texas was only helping Dennis because he thought Dennis would be easier for Joe the plumber to beat than
Well, yeah, I mean, seriously, a pet rock would have been better candidate than Joe the plumber. I think he might actually have been a pet rock before he was a non-plumber. So, but he was a union pet rock. Never mind. Turn Up the Night with Kenny Pick, streaming live every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern at Radio or Not, Talk Radio 1, Progressive Blend Radio, and KennyPick.com.
You know that the ice cream scoop has the power to make a child smile, and that by slowing us down, the traffic light can keep us going. You know that the golf tee brings friends together, that the mailbox keeps them connected. You know that the cataract laser helps you look to the future, while the pacemaker ensures that there's a future to be seen. You know that the lawnmower, the clothes dryer, and the elevator make life easier, that the blood bank makes life possible. You know that these things we count on every day started as ideas. But did you know all these ideas came from the minds of African Americans? Support minority education today so we don't miss out on the next big idea tomorrow. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. Please visit uncf.org or call 1-800-332-UNCF. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
The most important online radio station.
It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
4 years ago, we witnessed the first inauguration of President Barack Obama. In November, America decided one term just wasn't enough. This time around, Stephanie Miller and her team of two-term comics are coming to make this a party DC will never forget. On January 19th, just 2 days before Obama's second inauguration, the Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour starring Hal Sparks, John Fugelsang, Aisha Tyler, and the Goddess of Liberals, Stephanie Miller, will perform live at the Warner Theater in Washington, D.C. Tickets are available at Ticketmaster.com, and if you want to skip the fees, stop by the Warner Theater box office at 513 13th Street Northwest. The Teabaggers lost in November, so Stephanie is going to do her thing before the inaugural balls.
That means two things.
That's the Stephanie Miller Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour, live in D.C. Inauguration Weekend. For more information, go to sexyliberal.com. Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Hope everybody out there is having a wonderful Sunday morning. You know, this week marked some amazing events in the state of Washington, besides just the pot legalization. Gay couples, for the first time in some up to 32 years, were allowed to marry the person that they loved. And I think many of us progressives around the country were celebrating that news with them and for them, and proud that they were granted equal rights for the first time in a very long time. Well, as if to harp our buzz, so to speak, what do we hear this last Friday? The U.S. Supreme Court is going to take another look at same-sex marriage. Easy for me to say.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's another look, though. I think this may be...
First serious look.
Yeah. This is a big deal.
Right.
Two cases.
Yes. Prop 8 and DOMA.
Prop 8 being?
The ban on same-sex marriage in California. Mm-hmm. And DOMA, of course, being the Defense of Marriage Act, which is just...
one of those silly Republican namings that doesn't mean what it says.
Yes. Essentially, the court is going to be looking at this question in reference to both bills. When a state chooses to permit the marriage of same-sex couples, can the federal government refuse to recognize their validity? So it's a tenther question.
It is. It's a supremacy. It's a full faith and credit question.
Right.
The thing is that states are given that, there's no federal marriage certificate.
Right.
These are state-issued certificates, so who may get them is, of course, up to the states. That's why state by state this is occurring. But in terms of, that's why DOMA was put out there, though, to say, even if you do it, we're not going to recognize you. Go to another state, no. Or if the federal
Which thankfully Obama has stopped enforcing.
Right. So there's two parts to DOMA. One is state to state, one's federal to state. They're looking at the federal to state one. But it gives them an opportunity to look at the Equal Protection Clause and whether or not this violates it. And this is a big deal.
Yes. For many other types of legislation, rights, if something is honored in one state, it is honored throughout the country. In the case of gay marriage, that isn't so. No. So the Supreme Court is going to take another look at this, and many people are worried given the Supreme Court's conservative makeup. But
Scalia's already come out and said no.
Right. But the question I think us as progressives have to wonder is, when are states' rights a good thing?
We're all tenthers at times, it seems.
Exactly. Many of us are frustrated with the so-called tenthers, those who say states' rights trump that of the federal government.
Although on our side, if this comes out, we're not going to try to secede. There's a difference.
Yes, exactly. We'll just keep fighting. We'll keep pushing for everybody to have equal rights in this country. But 9 states have agreed to legalize same-sex marriage: Connecticut, Iowa, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Vermont, and Washington, all of which the state has said that people should be given the right to marry who they love. And I think us as progressives support that and say the federal government should either leave those states alone or enact a federal right for gay marriage. Well, where is that line?
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to figure out, other than DOMA, where is the federal right to straight marriage? I just don't see the federal government's business in this.
Okay, fair. Great perspective.
There is this thing in the Constitution that says you must treat all people equally.
Yes.
So why don't we just stick to that and let the federal government stay the heck out of these types of things? And there I am a tenther.
I agree, and as am I. Either the federal government needs to stay out of the way, or they need to enact some kind of law that says federally all states must recognize a marriage, that was performed in another state.
They already have that in the Constitution, too. It's called the Full Faith and Credit Clause.
There you go. However,
that's not before the court, by the way, just so you know.
Us progressives, which are extremely tenthers in that case, argue against the tenthers in cases like SB 1070 in Arizona.
What about guns? Where should every state have to say,
enact
you
the same gun laws?
You have a permit in Texas? Well, come on to New York City.
Right. Where is the line that federal supremacy should be absolute, and where is the line that states should be able to enact their own rights, their own laws? And coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk to Mr. Jacob Dean about just one of those cases where we have marijuana legalization in some states. So what's your position here, people? Are you a tenther? Should it be states' rights? In which case, do we support SB 1070 or gun laws that are so lax, like Texas, that people can carry guns wherever they want? Or do you support federal supremacy that prevented the worst parts of SB 1070 to be enacted, but may also prevent you from getting high or marrying the person that you love? It's a tough question, and we're going to try and tackle it.
Damn, that's going to be a tough hour. I'm leaving. I'm just pushing buttons for that one.
It's a tough question, and we definitely see both sides of the issues. But we're going to tackle that and more in the next hour with Jacob Dean, the host of Filter Free Radio, and we have David Bender of Progressive Voices coming up next hour. It's going to be fun, so don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, on We Act Radio. Stick around.
It's Thursday, December 6, 2012.
The outcome of our work is not about what our political masters want. It is about what is demanded of us by 7 billion people.
Crunch time at the UN climate talks in Doha, Qatar.
What happens in the Arctic doesn't always stay in the Arctic.
More dire warnings from the Arctic. Pollution regulations really do save lives. Plus,
here at Exxon, we hate your children.
Yep, they do. All of that and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
When it comes to global warming, Governor Jan Brewer has her doubts.
You know, I probably don't believe that it's man-made. I believe that, that weather and certain elements are controlled maybe by different things.
Hey, go easy on the science there, Poindexter. We're only human. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Des, global warming caused by probably other things, maybe?
Yes, that was very scientific of Arizona Governor Jan Brewer there, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes, well, anyway, it is crunch time as the UN climate talks in Doha, Qatar conclude this weekend. The divide remains entrenched between developed countries and developing countries and how much each will cut their emissions of heat-trapping gases as the 193 member countries negotiate a comprehensive treaty to be completed by 2015 that would take effect in 2020. The talks have stalled on funding, with China leading a demand that rich nations, which have historically contributed the most emissions, should commit to giving billions more in contributions to a special fund that will assist poor countries with adaptation and green technology. Thursday, Nadarev Sanyo, leading the delegation from the Philippines, actually broke down when speaking of the record super typhoon Bopa that has killed hundreds in the Philippines just this week.
I appeal to the whole world. I appeal to the leaders from all over the world to open our eyes to the stark reality that we face. The outcome of our work is not about what our political masters want. It is about what is demanded of us by 7 billion people. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? If not here, then where?
A rare note of harmony was sounded, however, on Thursday. The Guardian reports the talks resulted in a tentative agreement to make fast reductions in emissions of short-lived but powerful pollutants known as soot, methane, and ozone. While governments argue policy in Doha, on the other side of the world, the science of climate change is unfolding right now at the fall meeting of the American Geophysical Union, including how global warming from greenhouse gas emissions is changing the Arctic much, much faster than previously predicted. The new Arctic report card from NOAA confirms that the Arctic lost a record amount of snow and ice last year, and that's already causing measurable biological changes in Arctic species. That's according to Dr. Jane Lubchenco, Chief Administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
What happens in the Arctic doesn't always stay in the Arctic. We're seeing Arctic changes in the ocean and the atmosphere that affect weather patterns, for example, here in the United States. We know that melting of ice in Greenland can contribute to sea level rise around the world. And many of the biological changes that we are seeing underway sometimes affect biological systems elsewhere.
The potential impacts of climate change on global security were also featured at the AGU meeting. Here's Chief Science Advisor to Britain's Department of the Environment, Sir Robert Watson, who was actually quite blunt.
The potential of displacing tens of millions of people. There's potentially going to be less food, less clean water, in areas that are already short of food, short of clean water. Therefore, climate change, coupled with other stresses, population increase, poor governance in many parts of the world, could lead potentially to conflict and migration.
Poor governance in parts of the world. Was he talking about Governor Jan Brewer by any chance? Well, I mean, there's a lot of people here who are running around with their hair on fire, and people like her just aren't listening.
Right. They're absolutely ignoring what the science says we are heading for.
And what scientists across the globe are shouting.
A new study proves air pollution regulations don't just clear the air, but also save lives. A new Harvard study shows that regulations reducing air pollution from industrial sources actually increased life expectancy across the U.S., most especially in poor and urban areas where factories and power plants are primarily located. The study also concludes that new pollution regulations, tightening standards of allowable air pollution from big industries, would actually provide even more benefits in saving lives and reducing healthcare costs. Finally,
here at Exxon, we hate your children.
A blunt new ad campaign takes aim at oil giant ExxonMobil.
We all know the climate crisis will rip their world apart, but we don't care. because it's making us rich.
Climate advocacy groups Oil Change International and EnvironmentalAction.org produced the commercial, which calls for ending billions in U.S. taxpayer subsidies for big oil. They're raising funds to air the commercial on TV stations around the country at ExxonHatesYourChildren.com.
Talk about rather blunt. Check out that whole commercial at our website, greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help sponsor the Green News Report so we can stay on your public airwaves. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
It's money that matters. Hear what I say. It's money that matters. In the USA. All of these people are
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. And joining us live in studio, our friend and one of our favorite people on earth, Mr. Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio and so much more with Skeptical Scott. Hi, Jacob.
It is so good to be with you guys live in nation's capital, Washington, D.C., in the fancy studios here of Talking Left and on the air on We Act Radio. It's so good to be with you guys.
We're very,
always.
very excited to have you. Great show on Filter Free Radio. Now you're Mondays and Wednesdays.
Expanding the independent alternative media, and that's what we need to be doing.
Absolutely. Since you are in D.C. and not going to be able to do your show this week, we figured we would snag you and make you help us do ours.
Heck yeah. Absolutely. Sign us up. More radio.
So before the break, we were talking about the Supreme Court going to hear the challenge to DOMA and when states' rights should be honored and when federal law should step into play. And I think a great example of that is the new marijuana legalization in Washington. Wouldn't you agree?
You've got I-502, which passed in Washington in November, legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes. And being a Oregonian myself, living in Portland, from Portland, I mean, we're only 10, 15 minutes away from Washington State anyways. So we were up on what was going on in Washington State, Colorado, and, of course, what was happening in Oregon. And it's interesting to see progress moving in directions that lean more towards progressives and really the general population.
So why do you think that legislation, which was also on the ballot in Oregon, didn't pass there?
Great question. And we did a whole program on Filter Free Radio, did a whole 2-hour show dedicated to Measure 80, which was the marijuana legalization measure in the state of Oregon. I actually had on the program with us for a quick interview for 10 minutes the author who actually wrote the bill, Measure 80. And I was talking to him, and I kind of knew, I had just this inside feeling, I don't know, intuition that Measure 80 would never really get the opportunity to pass in Oregon because one of the things, the way that all the 3 different laws were written in Washington State, Colorado State, Oregon State, the Oregon State measure was a little bit more laxed, you could say, on different limits of possession, different limits of how much, each person could grow in their own possession and these kinds of things. Oregon was by far the more laxed of all of the laws, and I think anyone who was kind of on the edge, leaning one way or the other, took notice of the other laws and realized that these other states put limits and other things in place, and that probably, in my opinion, swayed folks to say no in Oregon.
It's interesting that you bring that up because the Federal Justice Department and the senior White House officials have spoken out now against legalization of marijuana in Washington and Colorado. And it's not the fact that the drug was legalized that they're speaking out against. It's the possible regulation of it, in that the federal government and the Justice Department can essentially make this voter initiative null and void by suing the states on the grounds of them trying to regulate the drug. So could it be that Oregon didn't include those regulations because it would make it harder for the federal Justice Department to essentially go against what the people wanted?
I guess maybe the appropriate pun here is they're trying to nip it in the bud before it gets... No, I'm sorry. No, you're absolutely right. And it's whether... And again, it comes down to the states' rights. Are you a 10th? I love the conversation. And but really, one of the things here is you can't ignore the fact that it is illegal against federal law. Federal law, you can bring in the lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. Federal law trumps state law, and even you see, for example, with the medical marijuana operations in California, for example, you still see, and you hear in the news all the time of federal agents going in and arresting those folks and shutting down those operations because it's against the federal law. And all things considered, if your job is to enforce the federal law, and that's what the federal law says, then that's what they should be doing, theoretically.
Yeah, it really does, I think, pose an interesting question of when states' rights are supported. So many of us on the progressive side, I think, make fun of people who call themselves tenthers. And I don't think it's a conscious decision, but even the term tenthers, as if belittling them for saying states should have the right to make their own laws. Yet in cases like this, with marijuana legalization, gay marriage, election politics, election policies, we proudly support what those progressive states want to do. It's really standing on the fence issue for me. Don't you agree?
Yeah, because I want to, of course, follow all of the laws in place on all levels. I also want to encourage some states' rights and local governments getting involved, because there are some aspects of society and culture and things that local levels of government can implement and take care of much more effectively than the federal government in some things. And of course, like you said, it's on the fence. It's a give and take here and there. And that's why this is such an interesting conversation, because you have, two sides of the law saying two different things, and it's a contradiction. But both are right, so it's really interesting.
Yeah, I myself will admit first and foremost that I criticized the so-called tenthers when it came to Arizona and SB 1070, and I wrote a blog post on my old website about how federal supremacy should prevent the Arizona immigration law from going into effect. Yet I'd be lying if I said I didn't support these marijuana legalization initiatives, if I didn't support gay marriage initiatives. So I feel like a hypocrite for supporting both sides of that states' rights argument.
There is a way out of this.
How is that, Shano?
Especially when it comes to drug legalization. If you look in the Constitution, police powers are specifically left to the states.
Interesting.
So long as the marijuana is not being transferred state to state, it's arguable whether or not Congress even has the power in the Constitution to regulate and make it criminal. Well,
and you could make the case for gay marriage that it's a federal right to equal rights.
So that's how the 10th Amendment doesn't say everything should be done by the state, except for those, because we don't want to slip into that enumerated clause BS. Because so long as Congress hasn't acted on something, then the states can enact their laws. The question is, how much do we limit the Congress in terms of the scope of what they do? I would argue it's pretty vast, but where do we want to draw those lines in terms of they both occupy this space, it seems, when it comes to drug law. Is there a difference between a federal drug law and a state drug law? Of course there is. Does the federal government have the authority to regulate drugs within a state? That's the question under the general police powers. I don't know, but there's a way around it.
What are your thoughts on that one, Jacob?
Well, it's always great to have the legal or a little bit of insight into what's really going on behind the scenes. And Shane mentions the checks and balances, and I try to always make a general call for transparency in all cases, all the time, just as a general kind of thing. But again, it's which side are you on? And I'm so with you, Danielle. I too was a hypocrite of criticizing, those folks who want, that law in Arizona and stuff. Oh, it's a states' rights thing. Well, no, you're wrong. But then I turn around like, oh yeah, the states totally have the right to say if they want to legalize marijuana for recreational purposes in their state. Yeah, and hypocrite, guilty.
I never thought about it before until I caught myself supporting, these type of initiatives, and then I'm like, well, wait a second. I'll be fair here in I guess what I'll say loosely is journalistic integrity, and say, I'm on both sides of the fence, and I don't know how to weigh this. And I could make a case and say, I could totally use Shane's arguments, police powers. I could totally use, okay, well, there's a federal right to equal protection, so you shouldn't be able to fight gay marriage. I could argue both sides of that states' right points, but I know where I stand on these individual issues.
And it goes right back to kind of Shane's point. And I guess the question that we're getting at here is maybe is the whole states' rights the right way to go about this kind of thing? Is there a better way? Is there a way around it, like Shane was just talking about? Is there a better solution here? Maybe there's a different idea because, once you put in something like the states have the rights to make their own laws, period, that's kind of like one of those blanket things that whether you may agree with it this time, you might not agree with the law that some other state would come up with next time, and you can't have both sides of that.
Yeah,
cake and eat it too. I don't know.
I think Obama specifically can't have both sides of this as well. He has gotten the support of more progressives than he previously had because he's came out really strongly on the fiscal cliff legislation. He's stopped enforcing DOMA, et cetera, et cetera. He's really picked up some progressive support there. But in cases like this, where they may go after marijuana initiatives, I think he could lose some of that progressive support, which I think is really important right now to moving this country forward.
And real quick, because I know we have to go to a break pretty soon, but I know one of the things that I noticed being having a conversation with Paul Stanford, the author of what was Oregon's Measure 80. It's unfortunate because Paul, Mr. Stanford, wrote Measure 80 in Oregon specifically to stand up in the courts against a federal fight. And I don't believe that Washington's I-502 or Colorado's Amendment 64 was written as strongly in that sense of as Measure 80 was, in that sense of actually going up in like a court fight against federal laws and these kinds of things. But we'll see, right, as the Zen Master says.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think regardless of what happens, it's definitely a step in the right direction. Well over half of Americans think marijuana regulation should be left up to the states. It is still a violation of the Controlled Substances Act, and it definitely raises some questions about where states' rights start and end. But, getting the useless funding of the drug war stopped, stop putting people in prison for nonviolent offenses, and allow medical marijuana for cancer patients and patients of other ailments, I think are all important points. So we'll have to wait and see where that heads. But we do have to run to a break. We are speaking with the one and only Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio, live in studio. And you are listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, live on We Act Radio. Stick around.
And I just want to say, I think that was the most brilliant performance ever in the history of everything.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
It's our last errand today, Jimmy. Just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Whoa, there's so many. Did Grandma tell you which ones to buy?
No, but check out the label on this package. It'll help us find the right bulbs.
Does it really matter?
Well, sure. The new light bulbs use a lot less energy, so we save money on our electric bill by using an energy-saving incandescent, CFL, or LED.
How about this bulb?
Let's see. We need to replace the 60-watt bulbs in our bedside lamps. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
I've never heard of lumens.
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
You know, Grandpa, you're a pretty bright guy.
Yeah, you're pretty smart yourself, Jimmy.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. That's EnergySavers.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Energy.
You may be hearing about people having trouble making mortgage payments and risking losing their homes. Many of them just aren't aware of the options that can prevent foreclosure. There are many options available to homeowners, such as repayment and forbearance plans, loan modifications, and even refinancing. Where does someone go for help? They should talk directly with their lender or a qualified HUD-approved counseling agency. Both can provide helpful information without charging a fee. According to PMI Mortgage Insurance Company, it's not a good idea to pay for services that you can get for free from a lender or a qualified nonprofit counseling agency. To learn more, visit homesafepmi.com or call HUD at 1-800-569-4287 for a counseling agency near you. That's 1-800-569-4287. This message is brought to you by PMI, supporting sustainable home ownership that strengthens communities.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at WEAC Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the ARC. The ARC is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The ARC is also home to the ARC Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the ARC, so stop by and see them. The ARC, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the ARC's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The ARC, part of Southeast D.C.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hi, this is Tom Harper.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster of Take Action News.
I'm Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com.
Hi, I'm cartoonist and agent provocateur P.S. Mueller.
This is Nicole Bell of CrooksandLiars.com, and this is...
You're listening to
and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Great presidents aren't born, they are made. We've got to push people. They don't jump out in front of a parade if there's not a parade there. That is political suicide. The parade, metaphorically, already has to be in the streets with the picket signs saying, we need progressive talk in Portland, or we need marriage equality in Washington, or we need marijuana legalization in Colorado, whatever.
Trans-Canada Pipeline.
Stop the
pipeline.
We have to push for our positions because they're not just going to out of thin air.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
Turn on the radio. Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and our special in-studio guest host this hour, the one and only Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott, every Monday and Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern at filterfreeradio.com and radioornot.com, progressiveblend.com. Am I missing any there, Jacob?
All fantastic online independent media outlets.
And it's really interesting that you bring up those online independent media outlets. As many people who listen to this show know, we started simply as a podcast and then moving by the love of Nicole Sandler to live on Ustream and expanding from there, and thankfully now on the air as well on We Act Radio, 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. And so I was very intrigued by a recent Pew Research study that shows Americans are moving to listening to online digital devices. And for shows like ours, Jacob, I think that's great news, don't you?
Yes, please.
In 2011, 1/3 of all Americans, roughly 34%, or as I like the way it sounds better, 89 million people listen to either streaming of AM, FM stations like you can do with WeAct over on Stitcher or TuneIn Radio. And just in that 1 year, it's increased to 40% of Americans that now listen to audio on digital devices, meaning their phone, their computer, their iPad, whatever the case may be. But 40% of Americans get their news and radio, music radio from digital devices, meaning shows like ours have a far greater chance of reaching a lot of people.
There's a song, I don't remember who it's by or how it goes, but it's words to the effect of television killed the radio star.
Yes.
But I don't believe that television ever really killed the radio star. I think the iPod killed at least music radio in general. And I say that to say that it was obvious when things like the iPad came out and the personal MP3 player came out that, oh my goodness, I don't need to listen to the music radio station that I used to listen to. And occasionally I'll get one song that I like, and then I have to listen to a few commercials. And then when I can push a button on my iPod and listen to what I want, when I want, on demand. And that's obviously, where the society and culture is going. I want what I want, when I want it now, and I don't want anything else. And then somewhere somebody said, well, maybe it's not just about the music radio too. Maybe I can listen to the talk radio that I want, when I want, where I want, on demand, and get, maybe an alternative perspective or an independent, truth-telling, transparent host that can, cover some news and politics and not give it to you with any kind of spin on it. And then this kind of phenomenon happened where and I don't know if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing, but you're in general, because you see that music radio and these kinds of things are deteriorating in some areas and other things. So there's a big question on how do we maintain the medium of radio? What is the purpose of radio? I think the purpose of radio is news and talk and instantaneous communication. That really intimate connection that we have via the radio is always and will always be there, and that's why radio stands out. But in today's world where everything really is going online and society and culture is merging online anyways, you're seeing online radio growing, you're seeing online podcasting growing, and that's really one of the, in my opinion, the only outlet that we have to really tell alternative, independent viewpoints.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because you mentioned, digital downloads killing radio. Well, online internet radio is now even killing digital downloads. In the last year, the digital downloads have decreased by 2%, while music and talk on internet radio has increased 27%, and on-demand internet services have increased 18%.
And couldn't there also be because of the monolithic nature of what we are getting over the radio airwaves, that people's tastes haven't changed. They still want to hear all kinds of different things across society, but if you're only getting one thing, they're going to find it somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And maybe it would be worthwhile for some of those radio stations, if they are getting killed by the digital, that they kind of come on board and say, we're going to offer some more of a cross-section of what's going on out there, and they will come back.
Yeah. I think the people are clearly speaking here, saying media consolidation and having one company own every media in the market isn't going to work for them anymore. And so they're just circumventing the problem, and they're going to find their own news, their own talk, their own music in their own way. And it'll be really interesting to see how this affects terrestrial radio. Spit it out there. We are going to run to a quick break because we're going to come back with David Bender, the political director of Progressive Voices, and he's got some fun news for us, so don't go anywhere. This is Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and our great co-host this morning, Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio. We'll all be right back.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and you're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
One pretty good rule in making public policy proposals is this. If you're going to cite a source in support of your plan, first, confirm that your source actually does support your plan. Republican budgeteer John Boehner recently put a new deficit reduction proposal on the table, asserting that it incorporated the numbers of a plan put forth earlier by budget expert Erskine Bowles, a Democrat. Aha, gloated the GOP leader to Barack Obama as he plopped down this bit of budgetary bipartisanship. Gotcha. Not quite. Bowles promptly retorted that his numbers were not really a plan, but were simply back-of-the-envelope ideas, adding that the numbers are no longer correct. And that pretty well sums up the slapdash package that Boehner called credible. For example, he says it saves $600 billion by raising the eligibility age for Medicare to 67. That'd be no problem for Congress critters who do no heavy lifting and already get full medical benefits from taxpayers. But it's not a credible idea for millions of working-class folks who actually do heavy lifting and are not able to work an extra 2 years. Another incredible piece of Boehner's handiwork is the claim that it'll save $800 billion by eliminating unspecified tax deductions. However, the only way to reach that number is by severely whacking the deductions that people get for donations to churches, hospitals, universities, and other charities. Do Republicans really intend to do that? Or did they just not have a calculator on hand when they put this mishmash together? This is Jim Hightower saying Boehner keeps failing the bogusity test because his numbers are, well, bogus. And he's using bad numbers just to prevent pampered rich people from paying a little bit more into our nation's public treasury. That's not only deceitful, it's seriously shameful.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Michigan's battle over a Republican attempt to pass so-called right-to-work legislation heated up Thursday with thousands of protesters in the state capitol. Some were arrested as they lay down in a hallway outside the state Senate chambers, and state police used CS gas on them. The anti-union legislation attacks the financial base of unions by outlawing union security clauses that provide for dues to be collected from all workers in an organized workplace. When workers decide they want their workplace to be union, all workers hired in there become members of the union, and dues are often deducted from paychecks according to collective bargaining agreements. Right-to-work legislation makes it illegal for those clauses to exist and allows workers to be covered by collective bargaining agreements without being union members or paying dues. Unions say that allows freeloaders. UAW President Bob King is calling on Michigan Governor Rick Snyder to veto any right-to-work legislation that reaches his desk. Democrat Tim Grimal is the Michigan House Minority Leader-elect.
This legislation is bad for the middle class, it's bad for Michigan working families, and perhaps worst of all, it's bad for the small businesses and the local economies that depend on good-paying jobs to facilitate growth in our state.
For 2 years, Governor Rick Snyder has said he wouldn't support right-to-work legislation in Michigan, but he's changed his position. Even though Michiganders rejected some anti-worker legislation during the November election, Republicans in the legislature are moving forward with even more destructive right-to-work legislation now. Jesse Russell reports.
There is no demonstrations in the gallery, please.
If there's going to be demonstrations, I'll have to clear the gallery.
Michigan Republican Senator Tanya Shootmaker took the gavel to the people of her state on Thursday as they sought to have their voices heard regarding proposed right-to-work legislation. The legislation, which Governor Rick Snyder said Thursday morning he would sign into law, comes nearly 2 years after protests at the Michigan State Capitol over expanding emergency financial manager powers. Those new powers granted the managers the power to void labor contracts, fire publicly elected officials, and shut down schools. In November, Michiganders soundly rejected the new powers in a ballot measure. During those initial protests, Snyder had said he was against making Michigan a right-to-work state. Senate Democratic leader Gretchen Whitmer expressed the concerns of the protesting workers during a press conference.
This is about the middle class in Michigan. This is about our kids. This is about our future. And it's time for us to take a stand, and we are here to tell you we're ready to take that stand.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. I feel like I'm choking. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
Alright, express yourself. Express yourself. I do it. See, it's not what you look like when you're doing.
And welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and our guest co-host, Jacob Dean. Joining us now is the one, the only, the man who is right about everything, David Bender, political director of Progressive Voices. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Danielle. And Shano, it is, I have to tell you, that is an awesome responsibility. It is a burden. And to be Cassandra is maybe a blessing, but it's more often a curse, actually.
You were right about everything we spoke. You were right about everything we spoke to you about all year, about the debates, about the election results, and you are even right about progressive radio. Hence the creation of Progressive Voices. How do you do it? Do you have a crystal ball?
Crystal Ball is an amazing commentator on MSNBC, and how could the Ball family name their daughter Crystal? I mean, really? What were they thinking? I will say this. Some of these things are based, like Nate Silver, they're reality-based. You just look at the numbers, and you can make determinations based on facts. Unlike the Romney campaign, which refused to be influenced by fact-checking, I think that's the only way. You can look at the world, at politics, at life, and I try to do that as often as I can. I don't, it takes some time, it takes some patience, and sometimes you get answers you don't want. With progressive radio, and certainly with the new mobile platforms, we see that this is simply data. You see that more and more people, and certainly as you skew younger, it is a majority of people are getting their news and information from mobile platforms, which is why Progressive Voices is creating a channel on these mobile platforms where you can get it on your iPad, you can get it on your cell phones, and it will, be part of, the way in which we communicate with each other. And again, the problem we see with Fox has taken a thesis, that you can propagandize. You can make things up, which is the essence of propaganda, and make a lot of money doing it. They've done that. They've succeeded at it, and that has lowered the standards of our culture and of our politics across the board for the last dozen years. we believe that you can have a progressive point of view, declare it, but be rigorous about fact-checking, about getting it right. And, if facts have a liberal bias, it's because, as it turns out, facts tend to support the positions that liberals and progressives take. Simple as that.
Absolutely. You mentioned Fox and right-wing media, and we've seen this huge consolidation of media outlets, especially radio, be taken by the hands of one company. And I think people are showing recently that they are fed up with that, and they're using sites like Progressive Voices or apps like the Progressive Voices app to get the media they want, regardless of what might be available in their station. I think no longer are we confined by what we can find on the AM or FM dial in our car or our radio. We are simply accessing it from our MP3 players or iPods or other, smartphones or devices. And I think it's really changed the entire media industry. And you guys at Progressive Voices, of course, as always, are on the cutting edge of that. Tell us what's going on with Progressive Voices.
We're launching
some new
the
news
channel in the next week on TuneIn, which is a platform that aggregates, across the board: music, sports, news, information, talk. There are 40 million people. It's the largest platform there is, and that is a great step forward for our progressive hosts. Many of the people you know, Ed Schultz, Tom Hartman, Stephanie Miller, myself, people are going to be doing regular programming on it. But the truth is we are absolutely trying to find a way to break out of this sort of stranglehold that the right wing has placed on traditional media, which is, as it turns out, is also dying. If you look at the ratings for talk radio and AM itself as a medium, it's gone away. Those Rush Limbaugh, with his ad hominem attacks on Sandra Fluck, created a perception that advertising on talk radio is risky. He had enough of a margin to be able to survive. It hurt a lot of other people, conservative and liberal. It's turned it into a place where advertisers simply say, why bother? Why get caught up in this kind of hostility?
Right.
Somebody is not going to like our product. And so part of what we're doing with Progressive Voices is bypassing that old paradigm. And in fact, using, funding support that comes, some of it actually from foundations and others. There's a Progressive Voices Institute, rather like the Nation magazine is sustained, or NPR or PBS, and finding a way to do this so that you are not driven by the market forces, which can in fact be hijacked by the right wing, as we've seen. And so, we're moving into this world, and in a way that I think is very smart. I can't take credit for it. Some very bright people have been involved in creating it. John Sinton, one of the founders of Air America, who learned from that experience of what you have to do when you're up against the money machine that is Rupert Murdoch or the Koch brothers. You have to find new and smarter ways to get through, to break through the noise. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And I think it gives listeners, it gives individuals a chance to go against those Rupert Murdoch, the Roger Ailes, the big, right-wing corporate companies as well, because by downloading an app or maybe paying $1 or $2 for a subscription to those type of services, or to purchase an online application for radio, allows them to vote with their voices, their dollars, their time, and saying they're not going to be subjected to those big right-wing policies, that they're going to go around them at whatever it takes. I mean, we're seeing that in activism, in politics and all throughout the country when it comes to the environment and women's rights and, war and climate change, et cetera. And now I think this is also another way of protesting by saying, no, I'm going to get the media I want, regardless of how many stations you try and buy. Do you agree that people are using this as a form of individual speech with their dollars and their time?
Well, sure. And you and I have talked on this program a lot about there are different ways to vote, and I think that as important as it has been traditionally to vote electorally, to vote with the suffrage, it is as important and perhaps even more important right now, given how broken Washington is, to vote economically, to vote with your pocketbook. Interestingly, one of the things we're seeing is these companies, the pizza companies, among others, and Olive Garden and places like that, that have said that they were going to lay off workers or turn them into part-time workers so that they didn't have to qualify for the Affordable Care Act once it goes into full effect in 2014. They're losing money. They are losing huge amounts of their market because people are saying, if you're going to do this to your workers, I don't want to buy your product. Your pizza isn't that good anyway.
Yeah.
And frankly, what is it about right-wing pizza that Domino's or Herman Cain's? What was that?
Godfather's Pizza, which is, I think, the worst pizza on earth.
Yeah. They're awful to start with, but then their policies are worse than their pizza. And what we're seeing is that people do respond and can respond. And I've been saying this for a long time. It is equally important when we're not in a campaign season to use our purchasing power. That's the one thing that we have that dwarfs even the Koch brothers and all of Karl Rove's friends, the Sheldon Adelsons of the world. Collectively, 330 million Americans dwarf those billionaires.
Absolutely. I think Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio, another online amazing program, has a question for you as well, David.
David, always a pleasure to speak with you, bud. Hope all is well. Just listening to the conversation here, you mentioned, of course, the GOP stranglehold on the traditional media, and there's no denying that, Fox has, it's the behemoth of the cable news networks, for better or for worse. But is there any chance that we can, do you think, is it worth, reaching out to our brothers and sisters on the right and saying, hey, are you going to realize that what you're doing isn't working clearly, and you think there's any chance that that we can bring them closer with us and bring everyone up together, or is that just wishful thinking?
Well, ask President Obama how that worked out for him in the first term. Other than Chris Christie, who I am going to argue in a minute because I have some numbers I want to run by y'all, but other than Chris Christie, find me a Republican in the first term of the Obama administration who worked effectively, who worked cooperatively, who worked supportively with the president. We used to have brothers and sisters across the aisle. We now have enemies. We have people who have, adopted the Newt Gingrich, Karl Rove mode, which says, you're not just the opposition, you're the enemy. Now, that may not be the way we look at the world, but that's the way they look at the world.
Right.
And unfortunately, you cannot make peace with someone who is an intractable enemy, who doesn't just want you to lose an election and then reaches out. Maybe Mitt Romney would have invited the defeated President Obama for lunch to the White House. I don't know, but I do know that that's what we have done, and it has not been working in this broken system that we have. So the longer answer to your short question is I don't think so. I really don't. It used to be possible. It isn't anymore. And that's a tremendous problem. That is a horrible problem that we have in this country, that we do not have a two-party system where both parties respect each other even for the differences. Rachel Maddow talks about this all the time, how it is imperative that we get, again, a conservative or Republican Party that is rational, that is responsible. but it is as if we are speaking different languages. We are speaking facts, reality, addressing problems that exist and trying to find solutions, and they are simply looking to win. We want to win the argument. They want to win the fight.
Absolutely. David, you said you had some statistics for us in the couple minutes we have left?
It's interesting because I've been running the numbers. You know, this is why I have no life, honestly, because I wake up in the middle of the night and I think about these things, and then I have to look and find out what's true. You know, the perception is that the president won in a significant victory, not as great as 4 years ago, and the overall turnout was down. But that, you know, he won by almost 4 million votes nationally, and he won with 332 electoral votes. And that is pretty significant when you look at it on its face. But if you dig down below those numbers, and perhaps others have done this, I've not heard anyone do it, so I did it for myself just because I wanted to know. And it turns out that this election turned on 4 states. It turned on Florida, Virginia, Ohio, and New Hampshire. And out of what a total of 124 million votes cast, the president actually won re-election by about 420,000 votes. Now, my calculator and I are only barely acquainted, so I can't tell you what percentage of 124 million, perhaps one of your listeners can, or one of you can, that 420,000 is. But let me put this in stark refrain. If on election day, 211,000 people, or let's say 2 giant football stadiums full of people, you know, football stadium can seat 105, 110,000 people, the biggest ones. So 2 football stadiums had switched. People who had voted for Barack Obama instead voted for Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney would be president today. And he would have won with 272 electoral votes by carrying Florida, which he lost by less than a point, by carrying Virginia, which he won by, which Obama won by, I think, I have it here, 4 points. Ohio by 3 points. New Hampshire by 6 points, but that's 40,000 votes. It's a small amount. So we are talking about a tiny fractional shift of the overall electorate. And I will posit to you folks that what really happened, the reason that this election wasn't even closer and possibly had a different outcome, as good as Obama's campaign ground game was, that last 10 days, certainly the week prior to the election where Hurricane Sandy struck the East Coast, everything stopped. Where Romney would have had a chance to close the deal with those and perhaps have persuaded those 210,000 people to switch their votes to him or gotten more people to turn out. In fact, white males turned out much less than they had 4 years ago. If he had not been basically taken off the air, nothing was coming out of Mitt Romney because no one was paying any attention to him. They were watching the president be the president, do a fantastic job, and do it with a Republican by his side, which is the one thing the American people have wanted for 4 years, is just a window into how it can work if there is bipartisanship, but Jacob, what you were asking about. And Chris Christie, who has no future now in the Republican Party as a result of that, none. He's done. He'll be reelected overwhelmingly next year, but he has eliminated his presidential hopes as a Republican. That moment, or that what had played out over 5-6 days, however long the media simply only focused on that, may have been the difference in this election. And I know a lot of people don't think that. I do.
Well,
and these are the numbers behind why I think that.
It is certainly an eye-opening figure, and it certainly makes me really emphatic that we need to stay active over the next 4 years. And
Exactly right.
And
Exactly
Progressive Voices is a great way to stay informed and stay up to date on what we need to know. David Bender, as usual, you are delightful, and we love it when you take time for us. Thank you very, very much for getting up so early.
Pleasure, guys. And I don't want to harsh your buzz, but you've got it exactly right. We have a lot of work to do. There's no time for a victory lap.
Absolutely.
We have to have this president's back this time.
Well, you have a lovely Sunday, and everybody needs to go to progressivevoices.com, download the app, and follow all things David Bender. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Danielle. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. David Bender, everybody, progressivevoices.com. The Progressive Voices app is great. You should download it if you have a smartphone. We have just a few minutes left in store, but we're going to run to a quick break, and we'll be right back here on Talking Left with me, Danielle, Shano, and our guest host, Jacob Dean.
It's just implied, but we all know what's going on in this thought bubble. The kids don't know, but we do.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, this is Tim Cormall from The Tim Cormall Show. Join me and my guests most weeks for a progressive roundtable discussion about politics, news, and other fun topics. We laugh a lot about the hilarious antics of the right-wing nutjobs, as well as have serious discussions about issues affecting all of our lives. You can check out The Tim Cormall Show at timcormall.com, or you can subscribe to the show for free in iTunes by searching for The Tim Cormall Show. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Tim Cormall. That's C-O-R-R-I-M-A-L. So come on over and join in the fun at timcormall.com.
Filter-free radio. Filter-free radio.
Filter-free radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Make your voice heard. Unfiltered. Call the Filter-Free Radio comment line at any time. 202-6979-FFR. That's 202-6979-337.
I want to know what you think the most important issue is now moving forward. Is it climate change? Is it the economy? Is it jobs? The debt? What do you think is the number one issue? Is it single-payer for-profit health care? Is it the prison industrial complex? I think the number one issue is finding identity, and I want to say that as neutral as possible because I believe everyone everywhere needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror and say, am I going to be part of the people who come up with a sustainable energy solution that's conscious of climate change? Are we going to be the party that comes up with a real solution to the economy?
FilterFreeRadio.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Your view is not being represented in this country because all of our views have been corrupted by money and politics. Remember, 94% of the time, the candidate who raises the most money wins.
That's the fact that we need to drive home constantly. It's all about the money. Dylan Radigan, you rock.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime.
7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. So here's a 26-second message of encouragement.
Hi, I'm Stacy. Look, I've been there. It's tough. And I just want to say, if you find yourself feeling negative, use it as motivation. Let it be like the fuel in the fire to keep you going. Because the best is yet to come. Seriously, you're capable of great things you probably haven't even dreamed of yet. So don't quit now. See you at graduation.
Do you have 26 seconds to convince a student to stay at their desk? Now you can share your message of support at boostup.org. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
the most important online
See?
radio station.
It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost nipping at your nose.
Welcome back to Talking Left. I want to thank all of our great guests. Of course, Bo Hodai of dbapress.com. Go over and check out his great articles and follow them on Facebook at DBA Press. Even though we didn't get to talk to him, big thanks to Angelo Carasone. I'm sure we'll get together soon. Just some phone confusion there. And go follow him at GoAngelo. Of course, David Bender, political director of Progressive Voices, progressivevoices.com, and Progressive Voices on Facebook and Twitter. And to our special one and only Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott. Of course, you could check out his show anytime at filterfreeradio.com, but live Monday and Wednesday at 7 to 9 p.m. And follow him on Twitter at Filter Free Radio. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Big thanks, of course, to George Rodriguez of SoFlo Radio, Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com, everybody at We Act Radio, Alex Lawson, Kimone Freeman, Pete Callahan, Daniel Marins, Rich Webster, David Schuster, and anybody I could be missing. Major thanks to Mike Hardiman for our awesome intro music, and to Shano for doing an awesome job over there on the board. And last but never least, many thanks to you guys for listening. Remember, you're the reason we do what we do. Get out there, go do something. We'll be right back next week. Have a good Sunday.